Sorry.
A lot of ink. Yeah, so it's causing it. It's not economic.
Thank you.
I actually three.
Thank you. It's an exciting evening here in New Zealand. An evening with Hillary Rodham Clinton. And I'm eating an hors d'oeuvre right now because I've had nothing to eat all day. Apologize for the slow start. It's an absolutely beautiful room. We'll see if they allow me to continue doing this. One of my more bizarre live streams. Eating here. Now, I would say it's pretty likely that they'll object to me filming in here, but I hope not. They said cameras are allowed, and they saw, everything in the bag. I'm live streaming right now on the 21st Century 3D channel because of strikes. We've spoken about that quite a bit. So let's see if we can check it out and see what we got going. There won't be too much going on this stream until Mrs. Clinton shows up. So I'm sort of vamping right now. We've got 24 people watching on YouTube, so maybe we could get some more. All right. So yeah, I'm here in New Zealand, and I was keeping it kind of quiet because, we've had international trips in the past that have been screwed up by people who just love to, call hoaxes in. I'm here. Yeah, Charlie's saying I'm going to get booted. Well, it's possible. It's a VIP function. I did pay full price to get in. This is a very exclusive event. And we'll see what Mrs. Clinton and John Key have to say. I'm here in New Zealand, of course, to meet with my friend Harmon Wilfred. I'm in Auckland today. I arrived a few days ago. People may have noticed I've been live streaming with Quinn and Charles from that tiny little white hotel room. That was the spot. And gonna make my way out of here to some other locations around in New Zealand. New Zealand's a beautiful country if you haven't been here. I had hoped to meet with Kim.com. He didn't respond to any of my messages. I'm quite intrigued that Mr. .com seems to follow people that I interview, including Harmon, including our friend who is running for sheriff in Colorado. I don't know why he's doing that. Showed up on my live streams. He's a multi-millionaire. Yeah, I don't think she's got the anklet bracelet. Will Huma be with her? I don't know, the boy. We'll see. I don't think so. I saw a picture in the local newspaper today of Hillary walking around with some of her people. Huma was not among them. She was having a lamb dinner last night, apparently, which is cool. It is New Zealand. Lamb is the thing. I've got a good spot if this is the stage where she's going to be speaking. Now again, this is a preliminary VIP party, and you can see the room here. This is a lovely place to have your corporate event here at the Spark Arena. Oh, sorry. Let's get the Crowdsource the Truth logo up there. So, well, Jeff, it's not money for Hillary. It's money to, explore these events. I'm here to hopefully ask Mrs. Clinton some important questions. I want to know if she and John Key are aware that Harmon Wilfred has been basically exiled here in New Zealand. He's a man without a country, and he hasn't seen his kids in 20 plus years. Too much echo. There's echo? I don't have the headset in. Let's see. Well, that's just the room noise. I don't hear any echo. Nothing I can do. But yeah, obviously these sort of trips, now that someone who I won't mention has in the past shown his proclivity to call venues and lie to them about what's going on, as he did with my trip to see. That's true, she's always late. But they got a whole arena here that's going to fill up at 7 o'clock, so hopefully she'll be on time. It's 10 minutes in right here. And so far, no signs of Hillary. We also want to be on the lookout for John Key. I'd love to speak with John Key. Let me bring up a picture of him so I'm sure I remember what he looks like. I mean, I know what he looks like, but he could be hard to recognize potentially. John Key is the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, and people may know that he resigned abruptly after the election of Donald Trump. And that stunned the country of New Zealand. How will I find him? How will I know? Is that him right there? That would be amazing. He's not going to be standing here at a table by himself. He's going to be announced. We'll just have to wait for everybody to erupt. Let's go back to the comments and see what people have to say. Sound is good. I heard it. I was listening. People want to see me dragged out like Laura. Well, I'm not going to, I don't mean to incite the place. I just want to ask legit questions. Laura and I have different styles. I'm not necessarily going to be, I'm not here to be Laura. I'm here to be me. Definitely want to ask Hillary if she's aware that Harmon Wilfred had a conversation with her husband's attorney at the time that he was president. And he was told that if he doesn't drop the matter of the Black Ops CIA financing and stop talking about it, that he would never see his children again. And that was 20 plus years ago. And so far, Gregory Craig's promise has held. So I don't know if we're going to have really much one-on-one time with Hillary. And I definitely want to wait. Kim.com was in a certain someone's DM on Twitter. Well, he DM'd me back in last June when that whole Seth Rich file came up. And it's interesting to see how all the people around that matter have gotten real, agitated lately. Somebody posted a video today accusing me of all kinds of crazy things, patently untrue. Patently untrue. I would ask the tall man to present evidence of anything that he said. There was no password theft, never was, not that I'm aware of. I certainly never told him about a password theft, although he claims to, they like to put these things out there. It's a pretext. I think he's trying to get me to, make a video where I say things that they can then call bullying and strike the video. So I'm having to be very cautious. People may know we're watching live right now on periscope.tv/CSTheTruth. Could be watching on VK.com. Hello to all of the patrons on Patreon.com watching with Vimeo. And of course, this is going live on YouTube on the 21st Century 3D channel because Crowdsource the Truth 2 has received a strike. to stop it from live streaming. Just as Crowdsource the Truth 1 received a strike to stop it as it was catapulting past 50,000 viewers. You see, I don't care about subs because of any reason other than the more subscribers there are, the more people viewing the videos, the more they get shared, the more the message gets out. So it's actually not true. I do care about subs because I want the message to get out.
Show your tables, okay?
That's absolutely fine. Do you mind being on a live stream video with me if you're standing here? May I speak to you? Would that be all right?
Yeah.
You live here in New Zealand, ma'am?
No, I do.
I'm Jason. Nice to meet you.
Jason.
Lovely to meet you.
You too.
So now, obviously, you didn't vote for Hillary because you're in New Zealand.
I would have though.
Yeah. What do you think about why did John Key resign so abruptly after the election?
I've got no idea. I've heard rumours, but I don't really believe them.
Were people around New Zealand very shocked by that?
No, I think he'd done such a good job. And what I saw when I looked at him on television, I was worried about how exhausted he was.
I see.
He just looked so tired, and I think he'd given it everything for a long period of time.
Was it health matters that caused him to
No,
resign?
he said he wanted to spend time with his family. And, yeah, it's a busy, I think, and I believe that. But there are rumours, of course.
There's a beef salad with roast pepper, you right?
Has any New Zealand Prime Minister ever resigned like that before without warning?
I don't know, I haven't thought about it, but look, I think it was planned.
Right.
Yeah, and it was a good time to leave. Yeah, I didn't think it was a big story.
Right.
But
Now.
then I'm a supporter of John Keys. I think he's done a fantastic job. So,
Right.
Yeah.
He's not very fond of Kim.com, is he?
No.
Everyone in New Zealand knows Kim.com.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
What do you think about Kim.com?
Kim.com. Well, he's on to his second young wife, and I don't know. He's not a very likeable person, is he?
No? Why not?
Well, because he's quite aggressive, and he said some things that were quite harsh.
Really? I'm not aware of that. What did he say?
Oh, well, he used to say threats he was going to make. I can't remember, but I know
Right.
I heard him say things that I thought were.
Most of the people I've spoken to around Auckland here are not big fans of Kim.com.
No, but he's not likeable.
Well, I mean, I tend to agree with you. I've had some personal experience with him, and he wasn't that friendly to me.
Yeah.
Now, have you ever heard of a guy named Harmon Wilfred? Do you know who that is?
No.
He is a U.S. Air Force veteran.
Yeah.
He's a former U.S. citizen, and he has unfortunately been forced to relinquish his U.S. citizenship because he learned about illegal financing that he had been sort of brought into as a CIA contractor. And when he began to expose it in the media, his life was basically destroyed. He's had to relinquish his U.S. citizenship, and he lives just outside of Christchurch. His wife is a Canadian citizen, but she's been barred from entering New Zealand, despite the fact that Canadian citizens normally don't need visas to enter New Zealand. And INZ has created huge problems for this guy. He can't leave the country. They won't give him citizenship, and he hasn't seen his children in 20 plus years. What do you think about that?
There must be a story somewhere. I'm sure that there's people making decisions that have good reason to make those decisions. I do believe that people try to do the right thing.
They threw him in prison for 4 months in an underground prison.
I don't know, and I don't know the backstory.
With no charges.
Yeah, I don't know.
They just stuck him in prison.
He must have done something.
Well, he blew the whistle on this multi-billion-dollar CIA black financing operation.
I'm completely out of my depth on that because I don't know about it.
Got it. Well, look him up. Harmon Wilfred. They've been talking about him.
Yeah.
Harmon Wilfred.
She's a lawyer. She might
Oh,
know.
maybe she'll know. Could we speak with her? I'm going to speak to Marie right now. Hi, Marie. Jason Goodman. Lovely to meet you. Do you mind if I record our conversation?
This is going back to America.
Yeah, it is. You're on Crowdsource the Truth right now. I understand you're a lawyer.
I am.
Do they have barristers?
I'm a barrister.
See, I thought that's something British. I don't really know what that means. But
Well, we do court work.
have you ever heard of Harmon Wilfred? Do you know who that is?
No.
He is a former U.S. citizen who was essentially forced to relinquish his citizenship when he began to reveal evidence and information that he had about illegal CIA banking operations. And you know who I'm talking about now?
No, I still no, but
Don't know.
I know that.
He was thrown in jail in Canada for 4 months, no charges, put in a prison where they had murderers and all kinds of stuff. INZ has denied him citizenship, but yet he can't leave the country. He is America's first political refugee.
And they can lock him up without charging him.
Apparently, yes, because it happened. Shocking, isn't it?
That's shocking, isn't it?
Yeah.
So he's had no right to trial, no right to be able to,
the man has,
see the evidence against him.
well, he's been through hell for the past 20 years. He hasn't seen his children in 20 years. A lawyer in the United States named Gregory Craig, 20 years ago, said to Harmon, if he doesn't drop the matter with the CIA financing and forget about it and stop talking about it, he's never going to see his children again. And that promise has held since then for 20 years. Have you ever heard of Gregory Craig? Gregory Craig, he's a lawyer in Washington, D.C.
No, I can't say that I have. I might have read something.
It's been in the Christchurch press, maybe not so much in Auckland here.
Right.
Have you seen John Key at the event? Is he here?
No, I haven't.
He's going to be here, isn't he?
Is he? I don't know.
I believe so. Were you surprised when he resigned?
Yes.
You were.
I was.
It was sort of abrupt, wasn't it?
It was.
And what do you think's behind that?
I'm not sure. I'm not into sort of conspiracy theories, but I was very sad when he resigned.
He was a good prime minister?
I think he was excellent. Yeah.
What did you think about the New Zealand Taxpayers Union? I saw something in the New Zealand Herald. It was from January 2017, where the Taxpayers Union had sort of criticized the $7.7 million donation to the Clinton Foundation. Did you see
I
that?
didn't know we had a taxpayers union.
I didn't either. I read it. I read it in the newspaper.
No,
But
I
did
don't
you
know
know
anything
about
about
that
that.
financial
No.
contribution? Didn't know about that.
No.
See, it's amazing how these things are sort of kept out of the news, and a lot of people just don't know about it.
No, they
Obviously,
are.
you're a lawyer, so you're on top of all this kind of stuff, or at least.
Well, no, but I mean, you're really only sort of in your area. And
What is your area of law?
criminal?
Oh, ooh, it's a good thing you're here tonight.
Oh.
I need a rim shot. Well, thank you for talking to me. I appreciate your input. Enjoy the event.
Yes, you too.
And please look up Harmon Wilfred.
I will.
I'd be curious to know what you think. And also look up Crowdsource the Truth.
Crowdsource.
That's where you'll see this on YouTube.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm talking to some people here. Oh, look, here's some food. That looks lovely. Thank you very much.
This one's a lamb.
All lamb. Beautiful. Gotta have lamb in New Zealand. I don't know if eating on camera is the right thing to do. How did people like that line of question? Look at the comments here. So we've got, how many people have we got watching right now? Only 44, it says, watching. That's a shame. I guess it's the time. It's the fact that the YouTube channel has received strikes. Very difficult to build up the audience. Let's see if any of these other people want to speak to me and have any idea what's going on with regard. Oh, look, I've got another copy of What Happened. They gave a gift bag, so that's nice. Perhaps I can give away the book to one of the viewers when I get back to New York. That might be a nice gift. I was hoping John Keys would be here. That was good to get the input of the locals. People don't seem to really like him.com. I know he's on the news quite a bit here, and so far I have not found anyone just walking around on the streets who is really supporting what he's doing here. No, that's just there. Can I speak to you for a second, sir?
It's actually his pile, I was asking. But yes, you want me to take a photo of you?
Well, no. I just wanted to speak to you. You're from New Zealand?
Of course.
I'm Jason. How are you?
Hi, Jason.
Nice to
Mark.
meet you. Mark. So I just wanted to ask you, what did you think when John Key resigned so abruptly after the election? It was surprising, wasn't it?
This is probably not a line of question I can help you with. Really.
All right, no problem. Didn't want to talk. It's interesting. I wonder, maybe he works for the government. I got to be careful with the questions because it's likely to, as people have said, get me thrown out. The guy was pretty tall. Let's see, who can I speak to here? I don't want to be too aggressive walking around. I want to wait for Mrs. Clinton to arrive so everybody can see what she has to say. Wow, what do you got there? Pork belly sub? Oh, that's all right. Thank you very much. It's like a lot of bread on that. Well, we're kind of just waiting for something to happen. Let's look at the gift bag, shall we? So we've got the Hillary gift bag here. Now, wait a minute. What did somebody say about orange? Was it Quinn Michaels who was talking about orange? So this is what happened. It seems somehow fatter than the U.S. version. I wonder if there's a different version. This is like, I guess, a program for the event tonight. And a pen, maybe so Hillary can sign it? I don't know. We'll have to see. But got some exciting things planned for later in the week. Going to be visiting with Harmon Wilfred and some of his associates, his advocates, some journalists who have written about him, and I guess it's not surprising that most people here don't really know who he is or what's going on with him. I presume, is John Key here? I'd really like to. Would you guys be willing to speak with me for a second? Have you ever heard of a guy named Harmon Wilfred? Do you know who that is?
No, I have no idea.
My name is Jason. How are you?
Hello, Jason. Good.
Lovely
Andrew.
Andrew, lovely to meet you. So Harmon Wilfred, he's a U.S. Air Force veteran and a former U.S. citizen. He's in exile here in New Zealand.
Okay.
Have you heard of this guy? Is it ringing a bell?
Maybe.
Okay. So he became a CIA contractor after his time.
Okay, I've read the story.
Right? And he was revealing some financial crimes of the CIA. 20 plus years ago, a lawyer by the name of Gregory Craig told him that if he didn't drop the matter and forget about it and stop talking about it, he would never see his children again. And he hasn't seen them in 20 years. And 2.5 years ago, his wife was barred by INZ from coming into the country.
Yes.
She's a Canadian citizen.
I read the story.
So the man hasn't seen his wife in 2.5 years. INZ will not grant him New Zealand citizenship. He cannot leave New Zealand because he has no U.S. citizenship.
So he's a man without a state.
Correct. He's United States. He's America's first refugee here in New Zealand. What do you think about it?
It's a complicated issue that I know very little about.
But it's the first time it's ever happened. And don't you think it's strange that a lawyer would tell him you're never going to see your children again? That sounds kind of like
It's a complicated issue that I know nothing about.
Got it. Do you think John Key will be at the event? I saw he might. No, he will not.
I don't think so.
Oh, I thought he was going to be.
Oh, is he? You know more than me, you see, about both things.
What do you expect to see tonight?
I'm looking at it from a historic perspective. I lived in the States when the Clintons were in the White House, and so that's what I'm looking at.
Were you disappointed that Mrs. Clinton didn't win the presidency? Someone nodding their head there who doesn't want to be on camera.
No. Was I disappointed? I don't understand American politics.
What do you mean?
Where are you from?
I'm from New York.
Then you would know about American politics.
Well, okay, I guess.
Not always the obvious candidates win, right?
True. So you were disappointed that Hillary didn't win, or
No, I wouldn't. I was surprised, but I don't know if I was disappointed.
I think most people were surprised. How do you feel Donald Trump is doing as the 45th president?
Surprisingly well,
Uh-huh.
if you ignore his personality.
Right. But denuclearizing North Korea seems like a good idea.
And the war in
Syria?
Syria is going pretty well, right?
Keeping to a minimum. I wish they hadn't done the missile strike over that fake gas attack, but
Well, who knows?
let me redirect you more to domestic topics. Have you heard of Kim.com?
I know Kim.com.
You know him personally?
No.
Oh, you see him on TV and stuff.
Yeah, I know who he is.
What do you think about him? This is for Crowdsource the Truth. It's a YouTube channel that I have.
What do I think about Kim.com?
Well, it's your agent over there, huh?
Yeah. Again, it's a lot more complicated than I know about.
Uh-huh. But when you see him on television, what's your sort of visceral feeling about it? You like him?
It's a lot more complicated than I know about.
Are you running for prime minister?
No, I am not.
Because maybe you should. You're a good diplomat.
No, I don't know enough information to give you an intelligent
Fair enough.
response.
Fair enough. Anything you'd like to say to the people in the United States and around the world who are watching?
God bless America, man.
I appreciate that. Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
no
I
worries.
appreciate you speaking to me. Thanks.
All right.
Take care. There we go. Very friendly people here in New Zealand. All right. I think it might be time to start walking around and see who might want to have a word with me. Excuse me. Excuse me. Would you guys mind speaking to me for a moment about...
About?
Well, I'd like to talk to you about some of the issues that are going to maybe come up tonight. John Key and Kim.com.
John Key won't come up tonight.
No?
Not for me. No. I'm interested in American politics. So American politics, particularly gerrymandering.
Gerrymandering? Were you disappointed that Mrs. Clinton didn't win?
I was more than extremely disappointed. I sat there with a dear friend of mine and tried to work right down the Florida coast, right at the end, and thought that they might work. And sadly it didn't.
Right.
It was very, but I think that there have to be good things that can come out of the present administration, because it's actually making not only Americans but the rest of the world try to actually think about the morality of and the ethics of their political decision making and their involvement in politics, which is great.
How do you think Donald Trump is doing as the 45th president?
I don't think that America has had a worse president in probably the last 130 years, because in my view he's a psychopath. He tells lies all the time, which is a key characteristic of a psychopath. He has no empathy, and he's about himself, totally about himself.
You're
So those
describing
three-
some people that I know.
Well, 40% of CEOs are psychopaths, so it's not an unusual characteristic.
I wonder what the percentage of presidents are.
Well, his ability to disguise it is actually rather low, and that's probably suggesting he's higher on the playing. I mean, I'd have to go back into history. I mean, we've had historically, even in recent history, plenty of leaders who've been similar to him, but not in the high Western democratic societies that we hope that we can admire.
Were you surprised when John Key resigned so abruptly after the U.S. election?
Sort of, but I can understand how 12 years would be plenty in the political system. And he's a wealthy man, he's got family, and he's got other things that he probably can do equally as well.
Right.
So I wasn't that surprised.
Did you see this article in January of 2017 in the New Zealand Herald that said that the New Zealand Taxpayers Union had denounced the donation of $7.7 million to the Clinton Foundation? Did you know about that?
No, but I mean, those are the things that I'm interested in, but unless it actually takes me down, and it didn't really interest me that much. I mean, I've looked at what the Clinton Foundation are trying to do, and I admire most of what they're actually trying to do. There will always be fuzzy things that you don't understand, and it would love me to have time to talk about it, but the moral emphasis of it is fantastic. So,
Have you ever heard of Charles Ortel?
No.
He's an American investigator, and he's a writer, and he's been doing a great deal. He's a financial expert, and he's done a great deal of research into the Clinton Foundation and all of the various iterations, like, you know, the Clinton Health Access Initiative and all of these things were never actually legally set up as charities. They just started them and started receiving money. And most people don't know this.
Possibly true. It's probably like every small business. You know, it's got its legal framework, although both of them are lawyers, so that probably should have been done.
Right.
But I can imagine that people wouldn't have actually thought about it enough because the passion of the idea probably took them on.
Well, it's hardly a small business. It handles billions of dollars.
Oh, the whole of the charity is huge.
Right.
Huge, absolutely huge.
It's never been properly established as a charity,
No,
and it's never properly filed its taxes.
no, I haven't actually followed that through, and it's not part of my remit in terms of where I'd like to go.
All right. In terms of this conversation, you mean?
Or even the time I have to do things, you know. What am I going to focus on?
Well, right. Good point. Good point. Have you heard of Kim.com?
I have indeed.
What do you think about Kim.com?
Well, he's a really significant disruptor. So that's his business premise, and it's been very successfully developed. I think that he challenged a range of sacred cows, not least of which were the broadcasting companies and other groups in the United States that realised that in fact he could significantly disrupt their stream of income. And he did that. The person, I don't know him, so it's not something that I would want to actually spend time getting to know. I don't have that much time.
Are you shocked that New Zealand allowed a SWAT team to invade his home with machine guns?
Yes, I was. I thought that was crass and stupidly prepared. Somebody actually didn't get the thinking right.
Heavy-handed, huh?
A bit more than heavy-handed, and a bit
Driven by America, basically.
totally in this particular case, and that was sort of a foolishness like a small child being told by an older brother, you need to do this, otherwise, sort of thing.
How do you feel as a New Zealander that the United States seems to have that kind of influence over your law enforcement?
Oh, well, that was a single case. I don't think that they have that much more. I mean, and my mind immediately segues to the French and Rainbow Warrior, and how, you know, people tried to influence governments and organisations in different places.
Have you ever heard of a man named Harmon Wilfred? He's a United States Air Force veteran and a former U.S. citizen who became a CIA contractor after his career in the military and discovered financial misdeeds to the tune of billions of dollars on the part of the CIA. And as he began to report it in the mainstream media, Gregory Craig, who at the time was Bill Clinton's lawyer, told him to drop the matter or he would never see his children again. Since then, he's been basically forced to relinquish his U.S. citizenship, and he's in exile in Christchurch. Hasn't seen his children in 20 plus years. Hasn't seen his wife in 2.5 years. His wife is a Canadian citizen, and INZ has barred her from entering the country. Have you heard about him at all? What do you think about that?
Well, the way you describe it, it doesn't sound right, but I have no idea.
Well, I appreciate that. I hope you'll maybe look him up.
So where are you from, and what do you
I'm
represent?
from New York, and this is on a program called Crowdsource the Truth, which you can see on YouTube.
Okay.
Thank you very much for speaking to me, sir. I appreciate your insight. Thank you. Would you ladies care to speak to me at all? Would you ladies care to speak to me? How are you? My name is Jason.
Hi, Carmen.
Carmen, lovely to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you.
Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? Here, let's turn around this way so the light is on your face rather than behind you. So what do you expect to see tonight? Mrs. Clinton's not here yet. We paid a lot of money to get in, and she's more than half an hour late.
True. I can't wait to see her, actually, and to hear her speak firsthand. It's just to feel her energy.
Were you disappointed that she didn't win?
Straight into politics. I was, and surprised. I guess if you think of her background and her experience,
Right.
certainly, yes.
Right. And how do you think Donald Trump is doing as the 45th president?
Well, gee, he's stole the leading questions. I think it's a little bit of a worry. We're all a little bit concerned with some of the decisions that he's making, and you know, some of the things that he said really resonated with many of the public around bringing taxes back to America, and you know, really increasing for the middle Americans who felt neglected, actually
Manufacturing and that kind of
yeah,
thing.
you know, increasing their livelihoods and changing things for them. And I think some of those things he hasn't really delivered yet. But yeah.
Takes time, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, what about denuclearizing North Korea? That seems like a good thing, right?
You would think so, yes, definitely. So, yeah, and I think from our view, you know, it's great to see what they both have to offer and to see what Hillary's got to say.
I hope she gets here soon. Were you surprised when John Key resigned so abruptly after the U.S. election?
I don't think it was so long after the U.S. election. I think he really did the right thing to help his continuity, to actually let them build a presence and build new leadership before the next election. So it was very good of him to do that. And given his schedule and how much he's actually done, I think I'm not surprised really with his family that he was ready to take a step back.
Did you see this article in the New Zealand Herald? It was in January of 2017, talking about the New Zealand Taxpayers Union basically denouncing Mr. Key's decision to donate $7.7 million to the Clinton Health Access Initiative.
No, I didn't see that.
Were you aware of that?
No, not at all.
Do you know what that Clinton Health Access Initiative is?
No.
Well, that was an illegally formed charity that bought a lot of pharmaceutical products from a corrupt Indian pharmaceutical company called Ramboxi.
Oh, wow.
And then it sent those drugs to Africa, but the drugs hadn't been properly tested.
Oh, my goodness.
Their efficacy was basically dubious.
So the right intent but completely fraudulent. Wow.
Well, fraudulent, yes. Intent is difficult to really presume, but is that shocking for you to hear?
Yeah,
New Zealand, your taxpayer money went to that. And then,
I mean, I'm a big John Key supporter, so I saw what he's done. I'm an entrepreneur and a business owner, and you know, a lot of the things that they've done for businesses like ours have been phenomenal. So,
what type of business are you in?
Technology.
Ah.
And I've got two businesses, yeah.
What type of technology?
Mortgage platform. So we streamline the mortgage process, and then we have a data business. So we help businesses, everyone's got lots and lots of data, and help them deliver customer centricity and use the data they have.
That's great. Have you ever heard of a guy named Harmon Wilfred?
Sorry?
Harmon Wilfred?
No.
He's a U.S. Air Force veteran.
Oh, okay.
And he's a former U.S. citizen who became a CIA contractor after his military career.
Oh, okay.
And he discovered that he was involved in a variety of financial crimes on behalf of the CIA.
Wow.
And when he started going to the media and reporting it to the news, Gregory Craig, who at the time was Bill Clinton's attorney, told him to drop the matter or he would never see his children again. And that was 20 plus years ago, and so far Mr. Craig's promise has held true. Harmon has not seen his children in 20 plus years.
Wow, I didn't know that. Well, so where are you from?
I'm from New York, and we're on a show called Crowdsource the Truth.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Awesome.
Are you shocked to know that America's first political refugee is in exile in Christchurch, New Zealand?
I am. You're full of information.
Right. Full of something. Well, anyway, thank you very much for
delighted
the
to
one
meet
last
you.
thing I'd like to ask you about. You're in technology. What do you think about Kim.com?
Oh, yes, well, he's a bit of a
what?
crazy. Yep.
Crazy? Why do you say that?
Oh, I guess he's skirted on the edges, really, of what, you know, where there's grey. I guess he's really built an empire and built his wealth around that. So, yeah.
Were you shocked that the authorities basically stormed his house with guns and SWAT teams and helicopters?
I mean, we don't know what they knew, so I guess everyone was shocked, especially for that to happen in little old New Zealand. Yes, any day of the week that would be a shock.
I mean, but that was like going to Osama bin Laden's house or something, and here's a guy who's, you know, running a website. It seems like a little bit overkill, no?
Yeah, well, I guess without knowing what they know, yeah, true, it looks a little bit crazy.
All right, well, thanks for speaking to me. Very nice to meet you.
Cheers.
Take care. And I think some of my questions are making these people uncomfortable, and I wonder where Hillary Clinton is. If we were paying by the hour, we're definitely not getting our money's worth here. Let's see if anybody else wants to speak with me. Would you ladies care to speak with me for just a moment? My name is Jason. How are you?
Hello, I'm Natalie.
Natalie?
Natalie.
Mably, nice to meet you. How are you?
Good, thank you.
So I wonder where Mrs. Clinton is. I expected her to be here by now.
Yeah, me too.
It's surprising that she's not here, right?
Yeah.
Were you ladies disappointed that she didn't become the first? You were not disappointed.
Sorry.
That she didn't win the election.
Yes, very
disappointed.
Yeah. Guttingly disappointed.
You were gutted by that?
Absolutely.
And how do you think Donald Trump is doing as the 45th president?
Awful.
Awful?
I think you must be embarrassed as an American.
Well, I mean, you know, you don't think he's done anything good, like North Korea talking about
It's not
denuclearizing?
him that's done that.
It's not?
No.
Why do you say that?
Because there's other people working behind the scenes having those diplomatic conversations that is not Donald Trump.
You don't think he has anything to do with it?
No. No.
Were you surprised at all that John Key resigned so abruptly soon after the election?
No.
Not surprised.
So,
Did you see this article in the New Zealand Herald in January of 2017 that said that the New Zealand Taxpayers Union denounced the $7.7 million contribution to Chai? You didn't see that?
oh, to try the Minister of Health, the Director General of Health.
Well, right. Chai is the Clinton Health Access Initiative. Did you see that article?
Oh, no.
Did you know about that $7.7 million? I'm Jason Goodman.
What are you using the video for?
This is on a show called Crowdsource the Truth. You can see it on YouTube and Facebook.
Oh, thank you. Lovely to meet you.
All right, thanks very
Yeah,
much. Good
thank
talking
you.
to you. Take care. No, they didn't seem to like the line of questioning. It's a little loud up front here. It's maybe not a good spot to be interviewing people there. We'll see who else might want to have a word with me. Would you ladies care to have a word with me for just a moment? With me for just a moment? My name is Jason Goodman. How are you?
Jason.
I've got a show here called Crowdsource the Truth. We're on YouTube and Facebook and everything like that. And I'm just talking to hello, I'm Jason.
Daisy.
Daisy, nice to meet you. You both live in Auckland, I presume?
Yes.
And were you disappointed that Mrs. Clinton lost the election?
Yes. Yes, that was terrible.
Very disappointed, right?
Very disappointed, yeah.
And how do you think Donald Trump is doing as the 45th president?
Appalling.
Appalling.
Embarrassing.
Embarrassed.
Yeah.
Nothing good at all?
No, not really.
No. Huh?
Yeah. Must be a tough time to be American.
What do you think about the possibility of North Korea shutting down nuclear test sites and denuclearizing?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
But don't you think that's a good thing?
I do think
Donald
that's a good
Trump
thing.
did that?
Well,
Hasn't
did
happened
he do
yet.
that? Hasn't happened yet?
Well, I think he's certainly moved us in that direction. It's happening under his presidency, right?
Yeah, we've
Yes,
seen
they're
the
happening
handshake. We've seen the handshake over the border before.
Sorry?
We've seen the handshake over the border before.
Who's done that?
The North and South Korean handshake over the border has occurred in time before.
Well, but they've never said they were going to shut down the nuclear test
No,
sites. did
that's
they?
true.
So that seems like a step in the right direction.
Sure.
Were you at all surprised when John Key resigned abruptly after the election?
I think everybody was surprised about that.
Everybody was surprised.
Yeah.
Do we have any idea why he did that?
I think he saw that it was his time to go and he wanted to go while the party was in a strong position.
When was his prime minister term going to end if he hadn't resigned?
New Zealand doesn't have, you can be re-elected, so you don't.
But it's when was the election coming, I guess?
1 year.
1 year. So he only had 1 year to go.
No, in New Zealand you can continue to be re-elected just for multiple terms.
There's not a
endlessly.
two-term max.
No, I understand, but so he was prime minister,
Yeah.
and at a certain point during that term, there was going to be another election, right?
Yes.
When was that? When was that
1
coming?
year out.
1 year out. All right. So he resigned
Yeah.
only a year earlier. Have you guys heard of Kim.com? Do you know who he is?
Yes.
What do you think about Kim.com?
Not a great deal.
You don't think a
I
great
just
deal?
don't actually think of him a great deal. It doesn't actually enter my consciousness.
Were you surprised as New Zealanders that the authorities stormed his house with machine guns and SWAT team tactics?
Lots of things surprise me.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Harmon Wilfred? Do you know who he is?
No.
Harmon Wilfred, he's a U.S. Air Force veteran and a former U.S. citizen who has had to relinquish his citizenship. He became a CIA contractor and he was revealing financial crimes of the CIA. And in about 1999, a lawyer by the name of Gregory Craig told him if he didn't drop the matter, he would never see his children again. And INZ has barred him from citizenship. His Canadian wife is not allowed to enter the country. He hasn't seen his children in 20 years. He's America's first political refugee, and he's living in exile in Christchurch, New Zealand. What do you think about that?
I hadn't heard about it.
It's quite shocking, isn't it?
I don't know enough to comment.
All right, fair enough. Very good. Thank you for speaking to me.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening. I think the questions quickly get people interested in not speaking to me is what seems to be happening. So that's interesting. Maybe as people get liquored up, that might change. What is it?
Goat's cheese, Geraldine goat's cheese.
No, thank you. Goat's cheese. There's a lot of nice hors d'oeuvres here. Stabilizer is losing its stability, and it's quite warm in here. Well, let's see. How's the battery doing? Battery's doing well. And how's the viewership doing? We've been here. It's now 6:49, and the main event is intended to begin at 7 p.m. It still says only 44 are watching. I wonder if that's correct. 24 watching, 44 watching, 79 watching. That's better.
Goat cheese.
No, thank you.
Again.
Let's see what's the chat saying. They're reading comments, even funnier. Jim Camera, what are you talking about? I don't know. I have to see what this various people are saying. Excuse me, sir. Can I speak to you for a moment?
Sure.
My name is Jason. How are you?
Hey, Jason. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Are you surprised that Mrs. Clinton hasn't arrived yet?
Nothing fails to surprise me with the Clintons.
No?
No.
Were you disappointed that she didn't win?
Look, always disappointed when somebody who's obviously very capable with a lot of experience doesn't, probably get their just desserts, as it were. So, disappointed would be a fair word.
Well, she still might get her just desserts. We'll have to see.
Well, she may get it this evening. Yeah.
I don't know about that. So, and were you surprised that John Key resigned so abruptly after the election?
Yes and no. I think it was disappointing. I think it was disappointing for New Zealand as a whole.
He was well liked. Huh?
Yes, he was very well liked. Exceptionally popular and did a lot of good things for the country and in a lot of ways brought what I would say is a real commercial nous into New Zealand and New Zealand Inc. He left the country in good stead though, and look, we have a new government, a inexperienced government, but one that needs to prove itself. But ultimately, New Zealand as a whole is in a good spot. So we're still pretty optimistic.
Do you read the New Zealand Herald?
I do indeed. Yes.
Did you see this article in January of 2017, which said that the New Zealand Taxpayers Union denounced the $7.7 million contribution to the Clinton Health Access Initiative?
No, I didn't. That is beyond me, that one. No.
All right. How do you think Donald Trump is doing as the 45th president?
Oh, goodness me. I would say average.
Average?
Yeah. All right. That'd be about as far as I'd be prepared to go.
Have you ever heard of a guy named Harmon Wilford? Do you know who that is?
No, I don't. Sorry.
He used to be a U.S. citizen, and he's also a U.S. Air Force veteran who became a CIA contractor and discovered vast financial crimes being committed by the CIA. And when he started reporting those crimes to the media, a lawyer named Gregory Craig told him if he didn't drop the matter, he would never see his children again. And for the past 20 years, that promise has held true. He's living in exile just outside of Christchurch, and he's had to renounce his U.S. citizenship. INZ refuses to give him New Zealand citizenship. He can't leave the country. They've barred his Canadian wife from entering the country, despite the fact that Canadian citizens obviously don't need visas to enter New Zealand. He was thrown in prison in Canada for 4 months with no charge, never charged with anything. What do you think about this?
Hey, listen, I'm just here to have a good time tonight. You're talking about things that I know nothing about, so we'll leave it at that, eh?
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Chuck.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of people don't want to answer these questions. I may have to rethink my line of questioning here. How you doing?
Hi, good, thanks.
Aha! Find some people who want to speak to me. Everybody's getting a little bit drunk and kind of annoyed that I'm asking these political questions. I guess we'll just have to wait for Mrs. Clinton, but where is she? I guess it's not unusual for her to be late. Would you gentlemen care to speak with me?
Yeah, sure.
My name is Jason. How are you?
I'm good, Jason.
Bert, nice to meet you. You said Bert, right?
Rich.
Rich. I don't know how I got Bert. Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm Daryl.
Daryl, how are you? Are you guys surprised that Mrs. Clinton hasn't arrived yet?
I don't know. She's worth waiting for.
And were you disappointed that she didn't win the presidency?
Absolutely.
Totally devastated.
Devastating.
How do you think Donald Trump is doing as the 45th president?
Not too well, I don't think.
No.
I just think it's tragic. I just think it's I think it's sad for the world. You know, but you know, you've just got to try and stay positive. I think there's still so much good that comes out of the US, and what can you say about it?
What do you think about the potential denuclearization of North Korea? That seems pretty good, right?
That is great if it sort of does go ahead.
It's sounding good at the moment. We'll wait and see how the final details work out.
Right.
But it's all very positive at the moment.
And were you disappointed when John Key resigned?
Yeah, we were, sort of.
He was quite popular, huh?
Yeah,
Very
he was
popular.
really popular.
Well, he turned the country around.
Did he?
Yeah.
And he was a great sort of man for the time, for that 2007, 2008.
He's quite a
thing.
charismatic leader.
Yeah.
Why does Kim.com dislike John Key so much? Maybe the raid on his house with all the guns and everything?
Sure about
Maybe the raid, yeah.
Have you heard of Kim.com?
Yeah,
Yes, we
absolutely.
have.
Everyone seems to know him. What are your feelings about Kim.com?
Dodgy.
He's dodgy?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't really understand what he was into and why they raided. But
Well,
yeah.
he created a file sharing service called Mega Upload
Yeah,
that allowed
absolutely.
people to share large files over an encrypted peer-to-peer network, and it very quickly turned to basically sharing copyrighted movies and things like that. So ostensibly they raided his house for, crimes related to copyright infringement, but it seemed kind of excessive to use helicopters and guns and everything like that.
It was sort of weird for New Zealand. It was
Isn't
definitely
it?
one out of the bag, huh?
Seems like maybe the United States influenced that.
Sort of, yeah, could have been.
How do you feel about that as New Zealanders, to have the United States influencing your law enforcement?
I don't have an opinion about it at the moment.
I wouldn't like to see a lot more of it going on, put it that way. Yeah, it was definitely an unusual one. If it was happening every week, I probably would have more of an opinion, I guess.
Once or twice is okay?
Well,
Have you heard of Harmon Wilfred? Do you know who he is?
No,
I don't know.
He is a U.S. Air Force veteran and a former U.S. citizen. After his time in the Air Force, he became a CIA contractor, and he discovered massive multi-billion-dollar financial crimes being perpetrated by the CIA. And as he began reporting them, he was told by a lawyer named Gregory Craig that if he didn't drop the matter and make peace with the U.S. government, he would never see his children again. That was over 20 years ago, and so far, Mr. Craig's promise has held. Harmon Wilfred has had to relinquish his U.S. citizenship, so he's America's first refugee, and he's living in exile outside of Christchurch here in New Zealand. His Canadian wife has been barred by INZ from entering the country.
All right.
Shocking, right?
Yeah.
Sounds it.
Haven't heard about this guy?
No.
Haven't heard about it.
Well,
I know, I think there's a whole lot of stuff that we just don't know about as things, and we're pretty well read and sort of try and keep up to date, but I think there's a lot that goes on that, hey, we just don't know.
Well, I hope you guys will look into Harmon Wilfred. If you can see this interview on Crowdsource the Truth on YouTube.
Okay.
And thank you very much for speaking to me. I hope we get to see Mrs. Clinton. It's getting late.
I'm sure she will. She won't let us down.
I hope not. Thanks, guys. Take care. Excuse me, would you mind speaking with me for just a moment? I'm Jason. How are you? Lovely to meet you. Are you surprised that Mrs. Clinton hasn't arrived yet?
No, I'm not.
Not surprised?
Fashionably late.
She's famously late, right? And were you disappointed that she didn't win the U.S. election?
I think I'm not disappointed. I don't think disappointment would be the word that I would use, and I think that we have yet to see so that she can tell us her version of what she feels.
How do you think Donald Trump is doing as the 45th president?
silly but appropriate for the time.
So do you think he's doing anything that's good?
I do.
What do you think he's doing that's good?
Well, he is president of America, and he is the people's choice.
The people's choice. Okay. But anything in particular that he's done as president that you think is beneficial to America and the world?
No comment.
Okay. Okay. And have you ever heard of a guy named Harmon Wilfred? Do you know who that is?
No.
Most people haven't heard of Harmon, unfortunately. You've heard of Kim.com, right? What do you think about the way his house in New Zealand was raided by the authorities?
I think that it was quite an exclusive, a very, very exclusive time for him at that time, but I'm sure that he's at peace with it now.
Sure, he's what?
I'm sure he's at peace with it now.
Kim.com is at peace with it?
Now he's speeding up.
Okay, well, all right. I think he hates John Key, right? It seems like you don't want to talk about this anymore.
Not particularly.
Sorry? Okay, all right. Well, thanks for speaking with me. Bye-bye. Well, that was awkward, to say the least. People here just want to kind of chill out, drink booze, and talk to Hillary Clinton, but she's not here. So I don't know what to say, people. This is kind of a disappointing event, given the cost. Been here for 1 hour. The event was scheduled to take place from 6 to 7, and we're very close to 7 o'clock right now. Oh, Hillary has heard of him for sure. Message exploded. I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you could explode a message. I sort of need to be in this end of the venue to hear anything. It's just too noisy over there. And I imagine it's going to get noisy over here. It's hard to find people to talk to. Hey, would you guys be interested in speaking with me for just a moment?
RJ's our spokesman.
Hi, I'm Jason. How are you?
Jason, how are you?
I'm quite well. How are you, sir?
Very well. Am I the spokesperson?
Apparently, you've just been nominated. Are you surprised that Mrs. Clinton hasn't arrived yet? The event.
Yes, I am. Well, I was just looking at my watch saying it's
7 o'clock.
Being on 7 o'clock.
Right, it's supposed to be 6 to 7.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
She's not here. I wonder what happened.
Oh, she's probably entertaining the ultra VIP clients right now and engaging in good conversations. So
I thought we were the ultra VIP clients.
Well, somebody just told me there might be the gold elite level.
I
see.
And so, how do you think Donald Trump is doing? Were you disappointed Mrs. Clinton didn't win?
I am disappointed for two reasons. One, only less than 50% of the US turned out to vote. And secondly, the way Donald's been performing, from my perspective, is pretty poor.
You don't think he's done anything good?
I'm not close enough to it to know that, but just the way he's coming across as the current US president says no respect to the previous people who have filled that position and how well they've done. So,
Were you surprised that John Key resigned so abruptly after the election?
I think John Key went at the right time because he was sending the signal before the end of his term. And by all accounts, the Labour Party is doing pretty well in New Zealand. I think Jacinda's doing a great job, and she's pulled Labour from the jaws of defeat right through to victory in a pretty short period of time, so hats off to her.
A lot of people really do like John Key.
Yes.
Do you read the New Zealand Herald?
Yes, I do.
Did you see the article in January 2017 that described the New Zealand Taxpayers Union denouncing the donation of $7.7 million to the Clinton Health Access Initiative?
No, I didn't read that, sorry.
It's funny, so many people haven't seen it. Do you know what the Clinton Health Access Initiative is?
No.
Okay. It was part of the Clinton, collection of charities and things like that. Have you heard of Kim.com?
Yes, I have.
What do you think about Kim.com?
I mean, it's hard to tell. I mean, you only hear the media side of the story, and I'm sure there's two sides of it, but where there's smoke, there's fire, is all I would say.
And so do you think smoke, there's fire? Do you think that Robert Mueller's investigation of Donald Trump will find Russian collusion?
I watched Robert Mueller's account on 60 Minutes or CNN the other night. I thought he came across particularly well. He didn't strike me as somebody who was trying to hide anything. And quite frankly, what's he got to lose? I mean, he was standing up for his own integrity.
Did you know that he was the director of the FBI?
Yes, I do.
September 4th, 2001?
Yeah.
and that a 28-page Senate Intelligence Committee report about Saudi Arabian diplomats financing 9/11 was suppressed during his whole entire term at the FBI?
Well, I mean, at that level of in an organisation, in any role, you've got so many disparate bits of information coming at you. It must be hard to decipher what's fact and what's fiction. I don't know.
What to cover up and what to...
I work in a large corporate. I know you have lots of many pieces of information coming at you on things, so sometimes it's difficult to tell.
Did you think that the New Zealand authorities handled Kim.com fairly when they raided his house with SWAT teams and helicopters?
Some would say New Zealand, from a New Zealand perspective, it probably looked like an overreaction. So yeah, I think it was a slight overreaction, but having said that, I think there's something in there for Kim.com to answer to.
For Kim.com what?
To answer to.
Yeah. Well, he definitely doesn't like John Key, but we'll see what happens there. Have you ever heard of a guy named Harmon Wilfred? Do you know who that is?
No.
He's a U.S. Air Force veteran and a former U.S. citizen who, after his time in the military, became a CIA contractor and discovered massive multi-billion-dollar financial crimes. And as he began reporting those to the press, Gregory Craig, who was Bill Clinton's lawyer at the time, told him if he didn't drop the matter and make peace with the U.S. government, he would never see his children again. This was over 20 years ago, and so far Mr. Craig's promise has held. INZ has denied Harmon Wilfred citizenship here in New Zealand, and they've also barred his wife, who's a Canadian citizen, from entering the country. So he's America's first political refugee, and he's in exile in Christchurch, New Zealand. What do you think about that?
I'm not really close enough to it to know the story or to be able to comment on it.
Do you feel the United States has too much influence over New Zealand?
No, I don't actually. Look, myself and my wife personally love going on vacation to the States.
Where do you like to go?
West Coast and East Coast. But what I find is, in the USA, people are very humble and very welcoming and very Christian, and I think that's a great spirit that America should continue to push forward. I mean, I was in New York February last year, just after the election, and people in New York were very surprised about what had happened in the election. But they said, oh, well, if that's what we've got, then we've got to do the best with what we've got and hope it works.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But it had brought the community of New York a lot closer together. People felt like they were sitting down and talking more about the problems that the country faced, more than perhaps if the vote had gone the other way. So a crisis perceived at the leadership level became something that bonded the community together, which I thought was really heartening.
I can see why they've elected you spokesperson of this crew.
Yeah.
Well, we've got thousands of viewers around the world. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
I'd say come and visit New Zealand any time because it's a great country. Lots of beautiful places to see.
That's absolutely true. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I hope you'll look up Harmon Wilfred, and you can see America's First Refugee as a show on Crowdsourcing Truth on YouTube.
Yeah. Nice
Thanks.
to see you.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much. Take care. So there we go. I don't know. No Hillary still. That was good. Good insight there from that guy. People have got to be getting kind of drunk and kind of bored over here. It's difficult to pause the live stream. We're already over 1 hour and no Hillary Clinton. That's disappointing, to say the least. I think I could use some water. Excuse me. Would you guys care to speak with me for a moment?
Sure, yeah.
My name is Jason Goodman. How are you?
Hi, good.
Nice to meet you. I'm very well. Lovely to meet you. Are you guys surprised that Mrs. Clinton hasn't arrived yet?
We didn't have an expectation, so probably not.
But the event is supposed to end at 7, isn't it?
No, it starts at 7:30 and goes to 8:30, I think.
But I thought that was
just this event goes from 6 to 7.
I guess
can't imagine she'll turn up here.
I guess I misassumed that she would be here, given the amount of money they charged.
Oh yeah, okay,
Yeah.
To be honest, I have no idea how much.
Were you disappointed that she lost the presidential election in the U.S.?
Absolutely. As a woman, absolutely.
And do you think Donald Trump has done anything good as president so far?
In my opinion, not a heck of a lot, no.
No, huh?
No.
What about initiating talks of denuclearization in North Korea?
Opinion over this side.
Yeah.
Very strong one.
What do you don't think that's a good thing?
I think he got pretty close to actually being a bit worse than it actually became, but never mind. I think, I don't know that he's actually done what he's done to make it happen, or whether it's just there's a little bit of political game going on there from North Korea either. I'm not sure yet.
They've announced that they're going to shut down nuclear test sites.
Yeah, they've announced it, 9 times since 1990, was it? Or
Is
92?
that true? Have they done that?
I'm not 100% sure. It's those politics are a little bit further away from here.
Right.
I'm just impressed with what Hillary Clinton has done as a woman through her political career rather than being about her politics themselves.
Were you disappointed or surprised when John Key resigned after the U.S. election? It was a surprise, right? He's very well liked.
Yes.
What do you think was behind that?
Don't know. Had enough.
To be honest, I don't follow politics.
Don't follow politics?
No, I don't.
Have you ever heard of Kim.com?
No.
Never heard of Kim.com?
I have actually.
You have?
But I don't follow him.
What do you think about the whole SWAT-style raid on his mansion? It's pretty surprising, wasn't
It's
it?
old news, though. That was years ago.
It is old news, but I mean, as a New Zealander, do you feel that the United States has too much influence over law enforcement in New Zealand?
I doubt they have a hell of a lot, to be honest.
No, huh? Have you ever heard of a guy named Harmon Wilfred? Do you know who that is?
I haven't, no.
Never heard of him. Are you becoming bored with my questions?
You can tell I don't follow politics.
Well, Harmon Wilfred is a veteran of the U.S. Air Force, and he then became a CIA contractor. And he discovered multi-billion-dollar financial crimes on behalf of the CIA. And when he started reporting them to the news, a lawyer by the name of Gregory Craig, who was actually Bill Clinton's lawyer at the time, Bill Clinton was the president, he told Harmon that if he didn't drop the matter and make peace with the U.S. government, he would never see his children again. And for 20 years, that promise has held true. Harmon is now America's first refugee. He's been forced to relinquish his U.S. citizenship. He's living in exile in Christchurch, New Zealand. And INZ has denied him citizenship. They've barred his Canadian wife from entering the country. He hasn't seen his wife in 2.5 years.
How does this all go on behind the scene and you know about it and nobody else does?
Well, I'm the first person to interview Harmon, and I do a show called America's First Refugee.
Oh, okay.
And it's all about Harmon and what's going on with him here. I'm going to be going to visit him.
Okay.
And I'm just interested to get the opinions of New Zealanders, you know, the influence the United States has over your government and law enforcement.
I guess in terms of politics, I'm very uneducated. So there you go. I'd never heard of the people that you were talking about, which is a bit of a
Very
shame.
well.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's governments just do bad things, and I think every one of them does. I think it's just part and core of what happens.
Right.
So yeah.
Do you guys?
I'm not saying it's good. I'm not condoning it, but it does happen right across the
board, huh?
Across the board.
Do you guys read the New Zealand Herald?
Not a lot, no.
Don't read that. Is that a good newspaper?
Well, we don't read it, so we're not sure.
Okay, there you go. Thanks very much.
Okay,
I appreciate it. Take care.
Sorry, probably not very helpful.
No, that's fine. It's opinion. Well, it seems quite clear that Hillary Clinton is not coming to this event, which is shocking. If I had just known this was going to be booze and food, I would not have come. But the room is definitely getting quieter, which indicates to me that people are leaving. Sorry, folks. I was looking forward to seeing Hillary Clinton here. I could have sworn I even saw something that said you were going to get to meet her, which would have been nice. I've got to get something to eat. What do we got?
It's a duck croquette with a hollandaise dip.
Wow, that sounds fancy. Thank you.
Take one myself. Thank you very much.
A duck croquette. Can't say that I even know what that is, but it's tasty. What is it?
It's a chicken truffle with a smoked duck braised and a cherry sauce.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Let's see what the comments say. Hour and 12 minutes and no Hillary. All right, well, she's not coming. Yes, 712. Roger Clinton got pardoned for cocaine trafficking. That's true. I'm making people suspicious. Well, I think they just don't like the questions. These are people who just want to drink booze and go see Hillary Clinton speak. We've gotten some good insights from people. Let's see who else we can talk to. Hi. Would you guys be interested in speaking to me for a moment? I'm Jason. Nice to meet you, sir. How are you?
No, she's the one that booked the ticket.
Did you expect Hillary Clinton to be here at this event?
No.
You didn't?
No.
See, I guess I misunderstood. I thought Mrs. Clinton was going to actually join us tonight.
I initially did, but then we got an email saying there was a dinner if you wanted to pay another $500.
I thought that's what this was. This was... Wasn't
There's
this...
another one on top of that.
Oh my...
Yeah.
So it's just they keep re-upping 500, 500, 500.
Yeah.
Wow. That's quite deceptive.
So go on. Where are you sending that?
This is going out on a show called Crowdsource the Truth on YouTube.
We're pretty happy though. We think this has been pretty good.
Okay. Were you disappointed that Mrs. Clinton lost the U.S. election?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I was.
And how do you think Donald Trump is doing as the 45th president?
Better than I thought. Lasted longer than I thought.
Uh-huh.
I personally don't like him. I think she'd have been better.
Uh-huh. Do you think he's doing anything good?
Possibly. I'm not sure.
No. All right. Were you surprised that John Key resigned so abruptly?
No.
That's probably the clever thing to do, really.
Why is that?
Well, you're going to have another election and you're probably never going to make the next one, so probably his timing was good.
Uh-huh. And have you heard of Kim.com?
Yes.
What do you think about Kim.com?
He's clever.
He's clever?
I think he's clever.
Uh-huh. So you like him?
I don't necessarily like him, but I think he's clever.
Were you shocked as a New Zealander that the authorities raided his mansion with a SWAT team and guns and helicopters and everything?
I think it's probably not the way we think New Zealanders behave, but maybe they did it for the right reasons. But I still think he's clever, the way he's avoided any... he's still here, isn't he?
Right.
Yeah.
You think the U.S. had anything to do with that armed raid on his house?
Oh, I'm sure. Quite positive.
How do you feel about that the United States has influence over law enforcement in New Zealand?
They have an influence over an awful lot of countries right throughout the world.
Have you ever heard of a guy named Harmon Wilfred? He's America's first political refugee, and he's living in exile outside of Christchurch, New Zealand. He was a U.S. Air Force veteran who became a CIA contractor, and he discovered multi-billion-dollar financial crimes that the CIA was doing. And when he began reporting them, a lawyer named Gregory Craig, who was actually Bill Clinton's attorney at the time, told him if he didn't drop the matter and make peace with the U.S. government, he's never going to see his children again. And that was over 20 years ago, and so far Mr. Craig's promise has held. He's been denied New Zealand citizenship by INZ, and INZ has blocked his Canadian wife from entering the country. Is that shocking?
It's only shocking the way you tell it. I don't know the full story and I don't know the background, so it's only you telling me something new, so very hard to comment.
All right, well, I hope you'll look him up and look into it.
Okay.
All right, thanks for speaking with me.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Yeah, I think everybody at this event has had it with me. I didn't realize you had to pay another $500. That's very, very misleading. Very misleading of the Clintons. I don't know if I want to sit through her jibber-jabber in a large open event, which I guess is where everybody is going now. I have to say, paid $500 for this ticket and flew all the way here in part to see Hillary Clinton. Very disappointed that that won't happen. Everybody's filing out. I guess this event is over. Major disappointment.
speak for something? Going into the main function now.
Well, no Hillary Clinton. Would you ladies mind speaking to me for just a moment? Did you expect to see Hillary Clinton here at this event?
I actually did, yeah.
So did I. Why was I somehow misled to think that she would be here?
I'm not sure, but I had some interview questions for her.
What were you going to ask her?
The obstacles she's experienced being a woman in leadership.
Are you going into politics?
No, I work in leadership and management, and I'm all about females in leadership.
My name is Jason. Lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you.
And so you were disappointed that she didn't win.
Very much so.
I'm just getting closer so I can hear you.
Yeah, my whole group of friends were very disappointed. I was actually at a conference, and it was a woman entrepreneurship conference with all female presenters. And the whole conference went quiet. It was like a minute of mourning. But, oh no!
And so, how do you think Donald Trump is doing as the 45th president?
Well, I have an economics degree, and so I don't know much about the economy. But I can tell you, I wouldn't. I don't understand, I don't understand his policies. Like, he's not promoting free trade. Diversity is not being promoted in any way, shape, or form. It's actually, he's making it okay to be sexist, racist, you name it. So, disappointing. But that's why I'm here to support Hillary today.
That's why what?
That's why I'm here to support Hillary today.
Right. And so what did you think when John Key resigned? Was that surprising to you?
No, I thought it was a political move. Because, let's be honest, he wanted to get the other Prime Minister in there as soon as he could. So that was definitely a political move. I'm very much for Jacinda, but there's definitely some economic issues that I see there, or policies, but I wasn't surprised in any way.
And have you heard of Kim.com?
I have, yeah.
What do you think about him?
No comment.
Why is that?
I don't know enough. I can't comment. I don't know much.
Well, what do you think about the way his home was raided with a SWAT team and the guns and helicopters and all that?
See, it's not that I support or not. I don't know anything about him. I know that happened, but I don't know the background. I'm sorry, I can't comment.
No, that's okay. Have you ever heard of a guy named Harmon Wilfred?
No.
Oh, he's an American who is living in exile in Christchurch, New Zealand. He's America's first political refugee. I'm just trying to get New Zealanders' opinion on the United States' influence over law enforcement here in New Zealand.
I see. Well, I have American friends, and I have friends that lived in America. And I don't know what their take is, but it is, concerning for me to see a superpower, represented by Trump. I am on high alert.
You're on high alert?
I get my little app notifications about North Korea, and I'm like, what's happened?
Well, they're talking about denuclearizing North Korea. Isn't that good?
Yeah, no, that's great, but I don't know how much of it is fake news.
Fake news? Oh.
Trump. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't really trust that.
No? Well, talking about it is better than not talking about it, right?
Yeah, but it is an interesting time, and I'm really happy to be alive at this time, and I feel like we are seeing change, we're working towards the pay gap, equality, and diversity. So.
Do you read the New Zealand Herald?
I do, but I do read the Herald.
Is it a good paper, or no, you seem to hesitate?
No, I do. I like to get different sources of news, not just one monopoly on it.
There was an article in New Zealand Herald in January 2017 which said that the New Zealand Taxpayers Union denounced Mr. Key's donation of $7.7 million to the Clinton Health Access Initiative. Do you know anything about that?
I can't comment. I do know that the New Zealand government spent like $2 million on rescuing a penguin. So I can't...
$2 million doing what?
You've not heard about the penguin that they rescued? Or Shrek the sheep?
One penguin was $2 million?
That was a lot of money. I don't know the exact figure, but they did spend a lot of money.
Wow.
A lot of taxpayer money, because I was in the UK and I was very concerned. My family's taxpayer money was going towards one penguin that got eaten. Think twice.
Who ate it?
A shark, possibly. It
Wow.
was set free, and there was a lot of money invested.
But you were born in New Zealand.
I was born in Albania. I was raised in New Zealand. I have a very different background.
I see. All right, well, thank you for speaking with me. Lovely to meet you.
Cheers.
Take care.
And I don't, what is this being used for?
This is going out on a YouTube channel called Crowdsource the Truth.
Okay.
So I hope you'll go on there and check it out.
Thank you. Awesome. Cheers.
Bye-bye. Well, there we go. A lot of opinions from people. Yeah. Hi, how are you? How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well.
Were you expecting to see Hillary Clinton at that event?
Yes, I was.
I was too. Why did we think
don't
that?
know.
And where was she?
I don't know. I thought she would come through.
That was quite expensive to have a couple of hot dogs or whatever they were serving there. So were you disappointed that Mrs. Clinton lost the U.S. election?
I was hugely disappointed.
Uh-huh.
Hugely disappointed.
And do you
Because I
think-
was a Obama supporter.
Uh-huh.
And I lived in Boston.
Oh, wow.
From 2008 till 2012. So I was there when...
I'm Jason.
I'm Lindsay.
Lovely to meet you.
So I was there when they went to Unity in New Hampshire and had their event. But I was an Obama supporter. And then what happened is I worked through the Obama 8 years. And my email address got passed over to Hillary Clinton. So I was part of her email campaign.
Got it.
I was hugely disappointed that she lost.
And how do you think Donald Trump is doing as the 45th president? Awful.
Awful.
Nothing good?
If he pulls off North Korea, that's a win. But I think the tax changes were awful, and I think the majority of Americans lost out on the tax changes. I think what he's trying to do with Iran could cause major problems. What he tried to do with the healthcare was hugely different. It's just not going to work. Right? I know he got rid of the individual mandate, but I think that was a disaster for America. If he pulls off North Korea, good luck to him. We'll give him that. But healthcare was, the taxation for the rich was awful.
Were you surprised when John Key resigned so abruptly after the election?
I don't know. I don't understand that.
What do you mean?
I don't understand what happened, why he resigned.
Yes, right. It was a bit shocking, wasn't it?
I don't know why he resigned.
Did you read the New Zealand Herald?
I do.
Did you see the article in 2017 that was talking about the New Zealand Taxpayers Union denouncing the donation of $7.7 million to the Clinton Health Access Initiative?
No, I didn't see that.
Do you know about that?
Well, no,
$7.7
I saw a figure in the paper today that said we donated something like $17 million to the Clinton Foundation. Is that true?
Yeah, the number's changing all the time. I've heard 13.7, 7.7, 17 million.
In the Herald today, it said 70 million.
So what do you think about that? This guy's taking my picture, so I'll return the favor. Is he with you?
What do I think about that? I was surprised.
But what do you think about New Zealand taxpayer money going to the Clinton Foundation?
I don't think it's right.
Do you know that the Clinton Foundation was never lawfully organized and has no authority to distribute pharmaceuticals in Africa?
I have no idea.
They don't?
I don't have much idea. I'm sure you're right. I'm sure you're right. I have no idea.
What do you think about Kim.com? Do you know Kim.com?
Dodgy.
He's dodgy?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, how do you feel about the New Zealand authorities raiding his home with a SWAT team and helicopters and all that?
I think they probably had a case, but it was over the top.
Over the top, right?
Yeah, they didn't understand what they were doing.
You think the U.S. had any influence over that?
Absolutely. Obama did.
How do you feel as a New Zealand citizen having the U.S. dictate law enforcement with such heavy hand?
I'm surprised that New Zealand let it happen.
Have you ever heard of a guy named Harmon Wilfred?
No. Who's that?
Harmon Wilfred, he's a U.S. Air Force veteran who then became a CIA contractor, and he discovered vast, multi-billion-dollar financial crimes on behalf of the CIA.
I've never heard of him.
Well, he started reporting it, and a lawyer named Gregory Craig told him that if he didn't stop talking about it and make peace with the U.S. government, he would never see his children again.
I don't know that story. Was that Craig who worked for Obama?
Bill Clinton. He was Bill Clinton's lawyer. Maybe he worked for Obama. I don't know. He's still a lawyer.
There was a Craig who worked for Obama. It was the... Not the same one?
Maybe so. He was Bill Clinton's lawyer at the time that he made this threat.
Okay, I don't
And it
know.
was
I don't know that story.
20 plus years ago, and Harmon has not seen his children since then.
I don't know that story. Sorry.
He's had to renounce his U.S. citizenship, INZ.
Where is he now?
Well, he's living in exile outside of Christchurch, New Zealand. He's America's first political refugee.
I don't know.
INZ has denied his Canadian wife from coming into the country. It's shocking, isn't it?
I know nothing about it. Sorry, I can't help you.
Oh, well, you know. Hopefully you will look that up.
I will.
Yeah, Harmon Wilfred. And you can see this interview and more about Harmon on Crowdsource the Truth on YouTube. Thank
Nice
you
to
very
meet you.
much. You too.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Take it.
Enjoy the evening. So there are definitely some people who, like me, are surprised that Hillary Clinton did not show up at that event. I'm going to have to go review the literature that I was looking at when I purchased that $500 ticket to not see Hillary Clinton. Very disappointing. Oh, sorry. Just got in the way of the photograph. Would you like me to take a picture of both of you? Okay, we're going to take a picture of both of these ladies. I could tell. I now see where you get your charming good looks from. Let's just, here, well, you guys will both do it. You want vertical? Okay, ready? Smile. We'll take a few, right? Oh, it's on live. You want live? Okay, there you go. We took a few. Make sure you got one that you like.
Do you want a picture?
I'm all right with that. Sure, yeah, take a picture.
Yeah, you go right.
I'll smile. With your mom?
Yeah, you should. Dad might be jealous.
Thank you very much. Lovely to meet you. Thank you so much.
You came here all the way from the US.
I came here all the way from the U.S. specifically to meet Hillary Clinton at that event, and I was so disappointed that she wasn't there. But my consolation was meeting you two lovely ladies, and that's even better.
Nice to meet you. Lovely to meet you too. Hopefully, through a PR team, I know it's quite hard to get into because we work in the North Faculty. So I know that she's quite,
Guarded.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really thought she was going to be there at that. I mean, it was so expensive for her to not be there.
Yeah, so unfortunately, yeah, I don't understand why.
And there's some kind of speech going on now, I think, right?
I think so. I think so there's the presentation. I think it's mostly on the notebook, but
Yeah, I think that's going to be kind of boring, but I guess we'll
see.
have to see.
Lovely to meet
Enjoy
you.
the speech.
Yeah,
You too.
thanks.
Take care. People are so nice here in New Zealand. Well, I don't know if I want to sit through this Hillary Clinton speech. That seems like something they should pay me for. An evening with Hillary Rodham Clinton. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Let's see what the comments are saying. Should I go listen to Hillary Clinton and all of her jibber jabber about what happened or what didn't happen? Do people want me to go live stream the...
Oh, you can see them in there.
Do people want me to live stream the Hillary? I don't think so, Mr. DeWeedy. I'm not going to blame them. Well, cocktail party for grifters. You got it, Jim Cameron. Oh, boy. Can't use it inside the venue, so then there's no point whatsoever. Hillary Clinton's not at the $500 party, and I can't record inside the venue. Well, I guess that's... Oh, not this. I see. All right, well, I can't use the stabilizer, so maybe we'll go in and record a bit of the event. Might as well, right? Let me turn off the stabilizer here. Let's take the camera out of there. Hi. The ticket. What did I do with the ticket? I think that's it. Middle section. Okay, row 9, seat 37. All right, so we're still allowed to record, just not with the stabilizer. I don't understand why that would be. We're here in the venue. Be careful not to touch the screen. Maybe I can ask a question. Maybe I have a good enough seat to ask a question. Hi.
Hi.
9:37.
Row 9 and 37 is the last one on this side.
Wow, this is a huge arena. It's like Kanye West style.
Sorry. So that seat just
Right here? Okay. Seat 9, row 37. Hello, how you guys doing? I'm well. Whoops. You don't mind if I do a little recording, do you?
Not at all.
Would you guys care to speak to me about this event?
Sure.
So were you disappointed that Mrs. Clinton did not win the election? Hang on, let me get it into this thing here.
I think the world was disappointed that Mrs. Clinton didn't win the election.
Yeah.
You think Donald Trump is doing anything good as president, as the 45th president?
Not really.
Nothing.
Let me think. There must be something that he's done that's good. There must be something.
What about the talks about possibly denuclearizing North Korea?
Like, can he take credit for that?
Well, he is the president, and they're talking about doing it.
He's not the president of North Korea or South Korea, is he?
Well, but I mean, I think he's having some influence there. I don't know.
Well, is he? Based on today's news, it might be negative. So
what was today's news?
I'm not prepared to hand him that.
What was today's news?
Well, the DRK president basically said if Trump keeps claiming credit for this, then I'm going to back out.
I see. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, don't call my bluff, Mr. Trump seemed to be his.
I see. I see. I hadn't heard that. Maybe. Well, we'll have to see what happens. So, were you in the cocktail party there?
Yeah, we were. Yeah.
Did you expect Hillary Clinton to be in there?
Oh, I don't think we knew, but as soon as we walked in, we knew she wouldn't be there.
How could you tell?
Well, you just saw the nature of the party. There's no way she was going to be wandering around that. Too busy, too many people.
But there was something about the promotion of it that led me to believe that she would be there, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
Were you guys surprised?
Nice.
It would have been, right?
Yeah.
Were you surprised when John Key resigned?
Oh yeah, well, I think the whole nation was surprised when John Key resigned.
Sensible man.
What do you think was behind that?
Oh, I guess you'll have to ask him.
I hoped I would be able to at that party. That's why I flew from New York and paid all this money.
Yeah, I imagine that he's a smart man. He knew to quit while he was ahead. Really.
Good point. Good point. And what about his battle with Kim.com? They hate each other, huh?
Yeah.
What do you think about Kim.com?
Not very much.
Bizarre.
Try not to.
Yeah. He's the kind of person who does well in New Zealand. It's such a small place. He can create a big impact.
I think he creates a big impact wherever he goes. What do you think about how the authorities raided his house with a SWAT team and helicopters and all that?
Oh, that was definitely a bizarre episode.
I think it's very hard to judge these things unless you're on the inside. So I imagine that there was some good cause. Whether it was sufficient is another thing. I don't know.
Do you think the U.S. had anything to do with that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? And how do you feel as New Zealanders the U.S. has influence over your law enforcement?
Well, I mean, we're a member of the Five Eyes, right? So you could argue that we have a disproportionate influence.
I'm glad that you know about that.
On the protection of the Western society. So actually, you can understand that you would cooperate and accommodate your Five Eyes partners, right? But you just hope that they followed some due process and there was a bit of constructive checking and fact checking before they just weren't sure.
Have you seen? Do you guys read the New Zealand Herald?
Yep.
Did you see this article in January 2017 that said that the New Zealand Taxpayers Union had denounced John Key's donation of $7.7 million to the Clinton Health Access Initiative?
No, we didn't see that.
No, that's news.
Were you aware that that donation was made?
No.
A lot of New Zealand taxpayer money.
You're going to be asked to stop.
Hi. Am I not allowed to record?
No, I'm afraid you're not. And you're not allowed to use one of the selfie sticks inside, unless you're part of the media crew.
Well, I am part of the media, but I don't have any crew credentials. I can't record it all with the phone?
You can't use your selfie
Okay,
stick.
I'll put that away.
Yeah, if you could, that'll be fine.
No problem.
Normally you're not allowed to record as well, but
Thank you. Okay, so let's carry on there. Yeah, lots of money given to the Clinton Health Access Initiative. Have you ever heard of a guy named Charles Ortel?
Nope.
He's an American investigator, and he proclaims that the Clinton Foundation is the largest unprosecuted financial fraud in history.
Yeah, hard to know what to believe these days, isn't it?
Yeah.
You generally have to verify your facts before accepting them.
There's a program called Sunday with Charles that you can see on YouTube where he goes through extensive documentation from the IRS and all kinds of facts. I'd be interested to see what you guys thought about that. You both seem very well informed. Have you ever heard of a guy named Harmon Wilfred?
Nope.
Nope.
He is a U.S. Air Force veteran and a former U.S. citizen. He's America's first refugee, and he's living in exile outside of Christchurch, New Zealand. He became a CIA contractor after his career in the Air Force ended, and he discovered multi-billion-dollar financial crimes on the part of the CIA. And when he began reporting on that, Gregory Craig, who was a lawyer, he was Bill Clinton's attorney at the time, told him to drop it and make peace with the U.S. government or he would never see his children again. This was 20 years ago, and so far, Mr. Craig's promise has held. Harmon has had to relinquish his U.S. citizenship. His INZ has denied him New Zealand citizenship. His Canadian wife has been barred from entering the country. You haven't heard about this?
No, it sounds shocking though. You should get that out.
It is shocking.
It's a story.
Yeah, that's part of the reason I'm here, is trying to get it out.
Yeah, good.
So I hope you guys will look up the show.
I think the thing is that people don't expect full transparency or good conduct from their government, right? So you need the media and others to hold them to account, right?
I think so.
And I think America's democracy, you know, it's a really big government. So where are the checks and balances? You know, people assume that American version of democracy is the best way.
What would you say?
It is.
What would you say people assume about the corruption within the American government?
I'm sure there's lots of corruption.
Constant.
Pork barrel politics. It's outrageous.
But what do you think about what's going on in the FBI with James Comey and Andrew McCabe?
But who's the most outrageous there? Is that the Trump administration or the FBI? Whose conduct's worse? I don't know. You know, I'm sure.
I have my opinion, but I'm more interested in your opinion.
I think that if you want an opinion from the other side of the world, it's that we're just fed up of America.
Fed up with America.
Yeah. And I suppose the reason why most of us, and you'll find in this country, have a problem with Trump is that what Americans don't appear to be able to filter the way that the rest of us can is just bullshit. And everything that comes out of that guy's mouth is bullshit. Now he may not be any worse than the last 20 years of government in America, but what he's trying to claim is that he's draining a swamp, and all he's doing is adding to it.
Yeah, that's true.
So we're not fooled. American people might be, or some of them, but we're not fooled.
But if the director,
he's certainly not a champion of truth and justice in the American way.
But if the director of the FBI was doing things that were illegal, and Trump fired him, do you think that's draining the swamp?
Yeah, but he's not firing him for those reasons. You know,
How
if
do
he
you
were
know?
doing things that were illegal that were actually furthering his cause, he'd be fine with it.
The problem that Trump's got is you don't need a conspiracy theory to work out where Trump's gone wrong. He tells you himself. He has already admitted why he fired COVID. So that's as far as you need to go. I mean, you don't need to go further than what the man says.
You think Robert Mueller's investigation is going to find evidence of Russian collusion?
I think that
depends how deep the corruption goes, I guess.
I think that Mueller's investigation has clearly found something. Whether it's
what has it found?
We don't know, do we? But it's still going. And
are you guys from New Zealand? Your accent sounds a little
Scottish.
different. Scottish. There you go. But you live in Auckland?
Yeah.
Lived here 15 years. But America is a fascinating study, you know. So
sure.
Everyone loves American politics.
No, well, I don't know about that.
I just don't necessarily think that they're the ideal version of democracy.
Huh.
Yeah, I guess so we have experience of Trump in Scotland. It's a Trump's golf course in Aberdeenshire.
Oh, yes.
So he bought the piece of land he bought used to belong to my grandparents.
Really?
Yes. And the house, which he renamed McLeod House, used to be called Many House, and was owned by my grandparents for 20 years, and is a 150-year history before that. Trump came to Aberdeen, promised 3,000 jobs in the local economy, managed to get Scotland to, for the first time in its history, allow building on a special site of scientific interest. None of the jobs materialised. He bullied everyone in the local area that wouldn't sell to him. He's still doing that. The man, as a businessman in Aberdeen, went from being a hero to being a zero.
Wow.
And the New Zealand, the Scottish government was completely corrupted by it as well. They gave him permits based on all these job prospects, which never materialised, and he just basically was allowed to fast track his development as a result of these broken properties.
Wow.
It did not look. It was not a good look for the Scottish government, was it?
No, it wasn't. And so we're not fans of Trump.
I detected that.
Not to say that Hillary Clinton's perfect, but
well, that's a shocking story. I had heard something about the golf course in Scotland, but I didn't know
well,
that
there
much
are
about
two documentaries called "You've Been Trumped" and "You've Been Trumped Too." They tell the whole story really, really well.
But they're not. I mean, they're not. I mean, we know that some of the people that this has happened to. We know some of the stories. We've been to the golf course. We've seen what he's done.
He tried to cut water off for a 90-year-old woman living by herself.
Wow. Wow, that's terrible. All right, I think the music's getting too loud. Thank you very much. Enjoy the speech. Shocking information from first-hand accounts. Sorry?
Oh, no, just when you're finished.
I'm done.
Well, what I find interesting is that nobody thinks that any politicians in America are cleaner than a whistle. You know, everyone's tainted to a certain extent. The system is a bit broken, and probably in New Zealand as well. You know, democracy is not what it could be.
It's quite sad, I have to say.
Yeah.
Hopefully something better happens soon. Sorry?
You're in the media?
Yeah, this is going out live now on a show called Crowdsource the Truth that you guys can see on YouTube and Facebook and Periscope and Vimeo. And, I hope you'll check it out. You're on there.
No, if it's live, we'll miss it.
Is that? Well, but it's there for playback afterwards. I think my arm is going to break off. Let me at least plug this thing in so we can...
So tell me, are you funding independent of any political party?
I'm glad you asked that. I am totally funded by the viewers. And people can become sponsors by going to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth.
Very good.
That must be earned. And if organizations exist to serve, then leaders exist to serve.
The critical skill of the next century is not what you know, it's how fast can you access what other people know.
Everything that you want out of life, you will get through with and through other people. You have no idea the richness that sits in this room.
We think we're 30, 40 years into the information revolution. On this metric, we've just crossed 1%. We're literally just starting. So most of this disruption is actually ahead of us as opposed to behind us.
What is the single most important executive skill to cultivate? Well, what must you get an A on? It is the ability to make supremely solid people decisions.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are Whangara Mai Tawhiti of the Gisborne East Coast. We have come here today to share in this special day with you and to share in the kōrero of Hillary. Ladies and gentlemen, the next item we would like to do for you is that of an action song. This particular action song talks about a sunflower and the sunflowers that lie upon the plains in Gallipoli. This is dedicated to the men and women of Anzac. Here to share with you our song, Ladies and Gentlemen. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we leave you with our last item, and this particular item is what we like to call the national anthem of the East Coast. And it talks about a particular man and his journey from Hawaii here to Aotearoa. And that is the story of Paikea. Then the story of Paikea became the story of the whale rider. And just as a little girl led her people, we come here to listen to a magnificent woman and what she has to offer. Here, all the people of Aotearoa and everybody around the world. On behalf of the East Coast and Whangara Mai Tawhiti, would like to say thank you, and Hillary, no mai haere mai.
welcome to an evening with Hillary Rodham Clinton. Please welcome to the stage your MC and host, Linda Clark.
I'm not going to sing, you need to know that. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Good evening and welcome. Well, this is exciting, isn't it? I'm Linda Clark. I am the MC and host for this evening. You don't really want to hear from me. We know why we're here. We have got a ringside seat to some recent history this evening. We are lucky people indeed. And like you, I am very much looking forward to hearing from Hillary Rodham Clinton, someone who has for decades been consistently one of the world's most influential women. Whether she was the First Lady, a US Senator, the Secretary of State, and of course, most recently, as a presidential candidate. Now, as most of you will know, Hillary Clinton has recently published a political memoir. It's about that election, and it's called What Happened? And it's a good question, and it's a question many of you will have asked yourselves, both when it happened and since it happened, and we'll hear some of her thoughts about what happened in the course of the evening. So as I said, very lucky to be here this evening and very lucky to be so close to history itself. First though, where are my manners? A big thank you to Te Kapahaka o Whangaramai Tawhiti. You saw them, they're national champions, aren't they amazing? I can't think of a better way to welcome an overseas visitor than in the traditional Māori way, of course. A very stirring way to start this evening. Tonight is the first of a series of events about and featuring women leaders who have reshaped traditional roles and championed the cause of women and girls across the globe. And it's brought to you, as you will have seen at the outset, by the Growth Faculty. The Growth Faculty attracts the brightest minds from here and around the world to share important research and insights on leadership and business strategy. Its program, Women World Changes, of which tonight is a part, is turning a spotlight on the change that women can make for all of us. Now, tonight's guests can attest that being a trailblazer and an advocate for change is not an easy thing. For women especially, standing up and speaking out is a risky business. In politics, the world I know, female leaders face tougher standards and much more personalised attacks. Theirs is a lonelier path. Because even now, in 2018, women in leadership positions and in political leadership positions are still a minority. They're still expected to be warmer than male leaders. Their ambition is more often characterised as a failing than a strength. What they wear is watched and commented on. Now in New Zealand we have so often led the way for women. We were, as we're very proud to tell anyone who will listen, the first country in the world to give women the vote. And right now, we have a pregnant, unmarried Prime Minister. And a lot of you might say, so what? So what? We've got an unmarried, pregnant Prime Minister. Well, in so many countries around the globe, that prospect would be simply unthinkable. But as any woman who has stood up and spoken out will tell you, we still have a long way to go. Now, Hillary Rodham Clinton knows all about the cost of standing up, the challenges she has faced during her extraordinary political career, both beside her husband, President Clinton, and on her own right, have been daunting. In a moment, you will hear all about that from the woman herself. And later, Hillary Clinton will be joined on stage by another woman who's achieved some firsts in politics, this time here in New Zealand. And that is our first female Prime Minister, Dame Jenny Shipley, who is, of course, the current co-chair of the Business Diversity and Inclusion Initiative Champions for Change. Now, as we know, when you put two strong women together, you're guaranteed a good conversation. And our privilege tonight is that we get to sit in and hear that conversation. Now, before we begin, please turn your phones off. That's the little bit of housekeeping I have to tell you. There's no embarrassment in reaching right now into the handbag or, your side pocket, pulling it out and having a check, because if it rings, it will be embarrassing. I should tell you that behind the scenes here is like an episode of West Wing. So, Secretary Clinton never travels alone, which probably is a mixed blessing. There are so many security guys behind us that if your phone rings by accident, you don't want to be that person, so turn the phone off. You can follow the conversation on Twitter using #HillaryClinton18 or #GrowthFaculty, and we love that. Importantly though, before we begin, I need to give a big thank you to our partners who have helped make this event possible. So a very special mention to our supporting partners, Emirates, and also the House of Travel, and to all our alliance and media partners. Thank you for your support and for supporting and hosting your members and clients here this evening. And now, without further ado, would you please welcome to the stage the Managing Director of the Growth Faculty, Karen Beattie.
Good evening. Welcome. Over the past 4 months, in preparing for this evening, I've grown to truly appreciate the incredible drive and momentum, the sheer enormity of the Hillary Rodham Clinton story. For here is someone who has broken glass ceiling after glass ceiling to make history again and again in a fraught and extraordinary high-stakes career. It's easy to think we know Hillary Clinton after her from 4 decades in the spotlight, as she's moved from advocate and attorney to First Lady, US Senator, US Secretary of State, and presidential candidate. But headlines and interviews can never replace hearing directly from a leader who has expended so much energy, risked so much, and fought so hard to become a world changer, a trailblazer, and a role model. Tonight, Secretary Clinton will share her personal experience and global perspective, inspire us with a story of tenacity and resilience, and enlighten us with what's next, as she continues her lifelong commitment to improving human rights, democracy, and civil society. And as Linda mentioned, we'll be treated to an exclusive and powerful discussion when Secretary Clinton is joined on stage by New Zealand's own woman world changer, former Prime Minister, Dame Jenny Shipley. But first, to showcase some highlights of Hillary Clinton's remarkable life, here is a video that was played at the Democratic National Convention in July 2016. The moment she made history as the first woman nominated for president by a major US political party.
Here is a woman. What does she dream of? When does she feel proud? How many times will she leave her mark? How many ways will she light up the world?
She's got this wonderful, infectious laugh that carries quite far. And sometimes it'll be surprising because you'll be in the middle of something and she'll go, ha! And there's a joy and a mirth that I think sometimes the public doesn't always see.
I just remember her holding my hand a lot. I remember that a lot. And like I felt like she tried to soothe me.
It wasn't about pictures or a big production. She just kind of showed up and she had a very simple message: thank you, and I'll do whatever I can for you. And she would make good on that promise.
I love to watch her with people, and I can see the effect of her kindness and that it's real.
Hillary Rodham grew up in Park Ridge, Illinois. Her father was a Navy man.
My father was a chief petty officer at home as well as in the Navy, and he really had the attitude that, don't whine, don't complain, do what you're supposed to do it to the best of your ability.
Her mother, Dorothy, was terribly neglected. She was on her own, working as a housekeeper by the time she was 13. She once said that job was the first time she saw what a loving family looked like.
She told me one time her young parent left her overnight by herself. She was like 4 years old, 3 or 4 years old. And they gave her a set of coupons so she could go to the corner cafe and get food. And I mean, just the image of this little girl all by herself, walking down the stairs of the walk-up tenement, out the door alone, to the corner, to the cafe, and getting food with coupons just haunts me.
Here is a woman making her first marks on the world. She is, we all know, bright and promising, an achiever, and yet, extraordinarily, what is most striking about the young woman is her heart.
Her commitment to making people's lives better, her abiding belief that the same opportunities that Chelsea has had should be extended to every child. That comes through in everything that she does.
She could have joined a big law firm, been a corporate bigwig. Instead, she chose the Children's Defense Fund. There, she went door to door, gathering stories to help children with disabilities who were denied schooling. She challenged a system that kept teen boys in the same jails as grown men. She went undercover as a housewife to prove that Alabama was defying the law to keep its schools all white. She was successful at all three.
I remember watching her in class, and I just thought she was fascinating. And I followed her out of the class, and I got as close as I am to you, and I lost my guts and didn't speak to her.
I said to the person I was with, who is that? And she said, well, that's Bill Clinton. He's from Arkansas. That's all he ever talks about. And literally at that moment, I heard him say, and not only that, we grow the biggest watermelons in the world. So that's all I knew about him.
Here is a woman entering life as the wife of a politician. She is, to say the least, an untraditional first lady. In Arkansas, she boldly reforms the state's educational system. And in the White House, she eagerly takes on national health care. For old school Washington, health care reform is not welcome.
My mother wanted me to be resilient, and she wanted me to be brave. I was like 4. And there were lots of kids in the neighborhood, and I would come out and I would have like a bow in my hair, and the kids would all pick on me. It was my first experience of being bullied, and I was terrified. And one day I'm running into the house, and my mother met me, and she said to me, there's no room for cowards in this house. You go back outside and figure out how you're gonna deal with what these kids are doing.
Hillary works with both Democrats and Republicans, and together they create a plan that to this day provides medical insurance for 8 million American children. 8 million children.
It is a violation of human rights when babies are denied food or drowned or suffocated or their spines broken simply because they are born girls.
Now, you and I weren't there, but it has been said that the UN Fourth Women's Conference in Beijing was where Hillary woke up the world.
Human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights once and for all.
When she said women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights in 1995, that was a radical statement.
She had never held public office before. She'd been a senator for just 9 short months. And then our nation bowed its head in grief.
It appeared as though a dark blackish gray curtain had just dropped between lower Manhattan and the rest of the city.
Injury-wise, both my legs were shattered. they believe that the landing gear of the second plane hit me because it was so hot that it closed my wounds.
Around 9 o'clock at night, one of my staff people, one of Chuck's staff people came in and whispered to both of us that the White House had just sent up its first request for funding, and there was not a penny in it for New York.
New York needed a champion. Hillary and Chuck tirelessly worked their way across Washington, not stopping until they reached the Oval Office.
President Bush looked at me and he said, "What do you need?" And I said, "We need $20 billion. And Chuck Schumer said, "We need $20 billion. And he said, "You got it."
Her mind just quickly grasped, this is a much bigger issue than replacing these buildings. This is replacing the American spirit.
I remember just taking a few pictures, and when I got them developed, the flash from this camera against the dark sky reveals all the particles that are in the air. It looks like snow.
When our first responders began to get sick and questioned the quality of the air at Ground Zero, Hillary loudly took on the EPA and won them health benefits.
That the air was safe. It wasn't safe.
Not only did she say she was gonna fight for us, it wasn't idle chatter.
At the same time, she very quietly helped some survivors rebuild their lives.
I remember talking to Hillary, saying that I can't have this wedding unless I can dance. I need to be able to dance my wedding for it to happen. And she said, "You're gonna do it. I know you are." Hearing her say that helped me believe it.
Well, the bin Laden situation is a perfect example of how valuable Hillary's judgment and strength was to me in every decision I made.
I've seen the photograph. So have you. We'll never quite know what it felt like to be in that room. But look at her. Look at her face. She's carrying the hope and the rage of an entire nation.
When the opportunity arose for me to be part of the small group advising the president about whether or not the intelligence we had was strong enough for him to act, I took that responsibility personally and on behalf of the 3,000 people who were murdered, the tens of thousands of loved ones who were left behind, the horror that was inflicted on our country.
Just listening to her talk about what that meant, I think we all felt both the extraordinary responsibilities, but also the extraordinary privilege of being able to serve the American people.
I was sitting in a back room by myself with my feet up and my sneakers were sticking out of my dress. And someone came behind me and hugged me, and I had no idea who it was. And it was Hillary.
Without press, without fanfare, there are only family photos. Hillary quietly attended Debbie's wedding, and Debbie danced. She danced.
There is more than enough of the American dream to go around. If we are committed to growing it, nurturing it, passing it on to our children and our grandchildren, I can't think of anything more thrilling than being part of that.
We all hope for a better tomorrow. Any parent knows your every dream for the future beats in the heart of your child. Chelsea's heart beats Hillary's dreams, and Hillary's heart beats Dorothy's. It's how we are made. The American dream is passed down from generation to generation to generation.
There's lots of other ways we could spend these golden years of our lives. She wants to do this because she believes she can make a difference now, and I do too.
I am going to stand up and fight for every American, because I think if you are the president, that's exactly what you should do every day.
There are show horses, and then there are workhorses. Horses that you count on to deliver, and she's a workhorse.
You have to love this country, believe in this country, lift up the people in this country.
To have a decade after decade of being in the front lines of to try to bring about change.
And do everything you can to make sure they believe you're getting up every morning in that big old White House, thinking about them, understanding what they're up against, and working to make it better.
She does that because she feels deep in her heart that here in the greatest country on earth, everybody deserves a shot.
I hope to unify our country. I hope to bring people together. I hope to break down every barrier that prevents Americans from joining hands and making our country everything it should be. That's what I hope for my grandchildren, and I know that's what my mother would hope for me.
How many times will she leave her mark? How many ways will she light up the world? This is the woman.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm welcome to Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Wow, it is just great to be here and to be part of this growth faculty series, bringing people, listening to people, having a chance to trade ideas, thinking about a better future. I just couldn't be happier to be back here in Auckland in New Zealand. And I thank all of you for being with us tonight. I think we'll have a great conversation in just a few minutes between me and Jenny Shipley, your first woman Prime Minister. You're now on your third woman Prime Minister. Just saying. And I do want to thank the Kapahoka performers. I know I was watching backstage on one of the video screens. You can see why they are national champions, and I'm delighted they could be here. You know, I'm going to say a few words tonight before we get into the conversation, just to set the stage. But I want to start by acknowledging the deep friendship between the United States and New Zealand. It stretches back many years, and I'm very proud of the work that I did when I was Secretary of State to strengthen our relationship. Wellington and Washington signed a declaration called the Wellington Declaration, and it opened the door for our two countries to work even more closely on everything from responding to natural disasters to stopping the spread of nuclear weapons. And I'm proud of that because I think the spirit and dynamism of this country is going to have an even brighter and bigger future. New Zealand's success in bringing together people from different backgrounds and beliefs, having such a vital democracy as an example, which we so desperately need in the world, really means more in the 21st century than perhaps you even recognize. Because I love visiting this country, but more than that, I understand how important it is that what you do here, how you navigate into the future, will be one of the examples that we can hold up as to what works and why having the beliefs that we share in democracy, in freedom, in human rights is so essential. I want to thank some of you for sending good wishes a very long way during my campaign and the months that followed. I received a number of invitations from Kiwis to permanently relocate here. And I must say I really did appreciate the offers. gave them some thought. But I'm going to stay put because we have work to do in my country as well. But it's pretty exciting being here in the 125th year of your giving women the right to vote. And I think it is true to say, as Linda said, that you were the first in the world to do so. And we won't get to our 100th anniversary until 2020, but we really look with admiration at your history as well as your future. So a lot has happened since I was here last as Secretary of State. I became a grandmother twice over, which is truly about the greatest thing in the world. I was up at one of the monument parks, One Tree Place, right? And there were a lot more than just one tree, I have to tell you. I was confused about that. But I was walking up toward the monument, and just at that moment, my daughter called for FaceTime with my grandchildren, and the biggest treat that I could give them was to move my phone to show them the sheep. And, you know, my granddaughter is just screaming in delight, so it was a perfect day in every way. And I also enjoyed talking with people where I ate and where I shopped, and just had a very warm welcome. Also, since I was here, you may have heard, and clearly the film showed, that I ran for president, which didn't work out. And then I wrote a book about it called What Happened, and I did it because I felt compelled to figure that out for myself. And as I write in the book, you know, in the past I felt like I had to be, you know, kind of careful in public, sort of keep my guard up. Well, those days are over, and I am so pleased that I could pull the curtain back in the book on the unprecedented election, the first reality TV election in American history. And I talk about some of the moments that still frustrate me, but also those times I want to remember forever. The way it felt, as you can see from the video, to become the first woman to accept a major party's nomination to be president. And I'm still proud of the campaign we ran and the 65.8 million Americans who supported it. So writing the book was cathartic, sometimes painful, but ultimately reinvigorating, because it was important to try to sort out what did happen, because some of what happened was not a one-off. It is still happening. And it can happen not just in one election to one candidate in one country. So when people ask me, how are you doing? I say, well, as a person, I'm okay. But as an American, I'm concerned. Because what happened is as much about the future as the past. And there are lessons, I believe, in this book that apply to everyone. And I just want to touch briefly on 4. First, everyone in life gets knocked down. What matters is whether you get back up and keep going. And after Election Day, one of the most common questions I heard was, how do you even get out of bed? And I will admit, there were times when all I wanted to do was pull the covers over my head. But I instead spent time. I spent time with my family and my friends, a lot of time with my grandchildren. I read a lot, especially mystery novels. I like those because the bad guy usually gets it in the end. I did watch a lot of home and garden television shows, which led me into a frenzy of organizing my closets. I played with my dogs. I did some yoga. In doing yoga, I practiced something called alternate nostril breathing, which I highly recommend. I did have my fair share of Chardonnay along the way, and I started a new organization called Onward Together to encourage the outpouring of activism in the grassroots of our country that we're seeing from the women's marches to young people coming together, helping each other decide to run for office and standing up for issues like the environment and good jobs and health care, because we're heading toward another very important election in November. And we want to have as big a turnout with as many young people as we possibly can, who will be recommitting themselves to our democracy and voting for candidates who are focused on the kind of future that they deserve. So this has been inspiring and energizing, and I am thrilled at the level of excitement that I'm seeing in young people about politics this year that really is unprecedented in my experience. Now, the second lesson is the only way we will get sexism out of politics is to get more women into politics. And that's true in the United States, but it's also true around the world. The research is pretty clear. For men, likability and professional success go hand in hand. In other words, the more successful a man becomes, the more people like him. But with women, it's the exact opposite. The more professionally successful we are, the less people like us. And maybe some of you in this room have an inkling of what I'm talking about. And not only that, women are seen favorably when we advocate for others, but unfavorably when we advocate for ourselves. Now that struck a chord with me, because historically, people like me when I'm serving in a supporting role. When I'm First Lady in the White House, or a senator from New York, or a member of President Obama's cabinet. But the minute a woman, at least in our country, stands up and says, now I'd like a chance to lead, everything changes. And I can't think of a single woman in any walk of life, from business to the media, to academics, to the professions, and certainly politics and government, who doesn't have stories to tell. So yes, there are plenty of reasons why being a woman in politics can be frustrating. And that's why I wrote a whole chapter called On Being a Woman in Politics. But it also can be so deeply rewarding. You know, just by being at the table, you're bringing a perspective that might otherwise go overlooked. I had a great breakfast meeting and conversation with your current Prime Minister, and we talked about issues that we really care about, as well as her impending adventure in motherhood and how you balance family and work, a perennial issue for women to discuss. But it's more than that. You know, our extraordinary former First Lady, Michelle Obama, put it well just a few days ago, pointing out the consequences of holding women to impossibly high standards. Here's what she said. If we still have this crazy bar for each other that we don't have for men, if we're not comfortable that a woman could be our president, then we have to have these conversations with ourselves. I think she is so right. This is something we have to explore and understand and change. And it's something we have to also think about as we educate our girls. I've been inspired by the women and girls that I've met everywhere who are stepping up to lead. It's been thrilling to see little girls who come to my book signings or to events that I hold, and they wear their Wonder Woman costume.
I was thrilled to hear that 30,000 women have signed up for candidate training programs back home. So I hope women of all ages will read this book and be inspired to run for office, to compete, to do something that will really help them break their own personal glass ceilings. Just like the name of this conference, Women World Changers. We need more women in every way to think about how they too can be a change maker. The third lesson I want to mention is this. The forces at work in the 2016 election in the United States are still with us, and not only in my country, but around the globe. It was a perfect storm. Deep currents of anger and resentment flowing through our culture, a political press that told voters my emails were the most important story, the unprecedented intervention in our election by the FBI director, the information warfare waged from within the Kremlin. What we've learned about Russian interference in the election is more than alarming. It's a clear and present danger to democracies. It's right out of Putin's playbook. We know that Russian agents used Facebook, Twitter, Google, YouTube, even Pinterest. Yeah, can you imagine? To place targeted attack ads and negative stories. Now, they were intended to hurt me, but more than that, they wanted to flame division within our society. So they posed as Americans. They pretended to be environmental activists or Black Lives Matter activists. They even held phony demonstrations. So this isn't just about what happened, it's about what's happening right now. We've heard over and over again from experts, intelligence experts, technical experts, that the Russians are still playing on anything and everything they can to turn Americans against each other, from issues of race and gun violence to the humanitarian crisis in Syria. But it's not limited just to the United States. In Germany, members of parliament have been hacked by Russians. In France, President Macron's campaign was hit by a massive cyber attack just before their presidential election. Russian trolls pushed incendiary social media posts during last year's Catalonian independence referendum. And in Italy, Russia's state-controlled news agency was found to be the most influential foreign media organization, propping up right-wing candidates. So this is bigger than one candidate, one election, or even one country. In Australia and here in New Zealand, experts are sounding the alarm about Chinese efforts to gain political power and influence policy decisions. Anne-Marie Brady of the University of Canterbury has rightly called this a new global battle, and it's just getting started. And we have to take it seriously. The fourth lesson is one that's very close to my heart. There is no such thing as an alternative fact. You know, the Russian disinformation campaign during the election was successful in part because America's natural defenses had been worn down over years by powerful interests that wanted to make it harder to distinguish between fact and fiction. When leaders deny things we can see with our own eyes, oh, like the size of a crowd at an inauguration, or they refuse to accept settled science when it comes to urgent challenges like climate change,
it isn't just frustrating to everyone who prides ourselves on living in the fact-based universe. It's insidious and subversive to democracy. So where do we go from here? Well, I don't have all the answers, that's for sure. But I wrote this book in part to lay out some of the questions and provide my best understandings. I really believe our world is at a crossroads. And what we do next, not only as governments, but businesses, media, influencers, ordinary citizens, matters enormously. We are living through a global struggle between liberal democracy and a rising tide of illiberalism and authoritarianism. Now, Vladimir Putin has positioned himself as the leader of an authoritarian and xenophobic movement that wants to break up the European Union, break up NATO, weaken America's traditional alliances, and undermine democracy. And we can see this authoritarian movement rippling out from the Kremlin, reaching across Europe and beyond. It's emboldening right-wing nationalists, separatists, racists, even neo-Nazis. Here in Asia, we see strains of illiberalism in challenges confronting democracy in places like Thailand, the Philippines, Cambodia. And we also have to pay attention to what's happening now in China with President Xi's decision to abolish term limits and consolidate power. The consequences of democratic backsliding in this region have enormous global significance. I've said for a long time that much of our shared future in the 21st century and beyond will be written in Asia. And we will be better off if we are open, engaged with each other, optimistic problem solvers. And we have to pursue purposeful engagement with China. We have to be sure that we reach out and make clear from the United States and other democracies that we're going to look for ways to cooperate, but we also want to avoid confrontation because we can't imagine what that would look like. So yes, competition, of course. Confrontation to be avoided, while we still stand up for our values, whether it's with respect to China under President Xi or any other country. So there is a lot to do. In fact, the list is quite long about what we are confronting. But I'm fundamentally optimistic. I believe that free people have the best side of the argument. I believe we are on the right side of history. So I'm hoping that despite some of the warning signals and danger signs coming from my own country, that we will right our ship of state, that we will be reaching out once again to the world while standing up for our fundamental values and interests. And I know if we do that, we will have no better friend or ally than New Zealand. Thank you all very much.
Please welcome to the stage, Dame Jenny Shipley.
Ladies and gentlemen, what a privilege it's been to have Secretary Clinton with us this evening. I know, Secretary, you were greeted by this young Kapahaka group from Gisborne. They are excellent in their own right and are New Zealand winners, but they come from an area in our country that is the first to see the sun, Many of their canoes arrived in New Zealand over 1,000 years ago. And interestingly, many of our own history also arrived in Gisborne. And we are a young nation, 250 years young together with our Māori and Pākehā. And I was pleased that we were able to greet you because of your commitment to inclusion and diversity. We welcome you to a country that values diversity. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome formally again Secretary Clinton to our country. You talked in your comments about what happened, and a number of us, I'm sure, have had a chance to read the book. Did you need to write the book? You mentioned that you needed to write the book for yourself, and I remember seeing the Washington Post describing the book as a bitter memoir, and yet when I read it, it was painful but full of purpose. And I want you to just elaborate a little bit more about why you felt now, or then, that you needed to write the book, both for you but also for all of us, and what, in its essence, you think it will inspire us to do next.
Well, Jenny, I really felt compelled to write this book. I was shocked and devastated by the outcome of the election, and I couldn't make sense of it. And so many people who had supported me were in the same frame of mind. And I knew that it was a risk. Lots of people said I shouldn't write it, but I thought, I have to figure out what happened because I knew I'd made mistakes. Every candidate does. Politics is a game sometimes of inches, and I needed to come to grips with that. But I also believed, as I was just saying, that there were other forces at work. And so it was, yes, to some extent trying to figure out what happened, but also trying to understand what could happen, how to come to grips with it. So I launched into it, and it was very painful to revisit a lot of what I felt I had to confront. But in the end, it was really cathartic. And it was, for me, a way of laying out on the page for the world to see what I went through, how I felt, because it's by far my most personal book. There's a lot in it that is kind of funny, you know, what day on the campaign trail is like, and talking about how much time women candidates spend on hair and makeup and clothes. I mean, you lose months of time. And so it had that sort of inside, the little, you know, the little inside look at everything, but it was also on big issues as well. And, you know, look, I'm glad you enjoyed it because you're an expert. I mean, you know, when somebody who's in politics tells me that they enjoyed it or they learned something from it or they really appreciated my doing it, that really is meaningful because especially women, we need to share these experiences and understand what it is that is still holding too many women back.
Is there one thing, if you had to change the electoral environment, that was a consequence of your experience? I mean, how can you win the popular vote but not the Madam President that we're welcoming here tonight? Are there electoral reforms that need to happen in the United States?
There are so many. I have been against what we call our electoral college since 2000, when Al Gore won the popular vote, and some of you might remember had a really painful experience losing the election. So to me, it didn't make sense. It's a vestige of our history. I think it's out of date. I believe one person, one vote, and therefore the winner of the most votes should win. So one thing that's happening in our country is that states, our 50 states, some of them are moving toward a law that would direct what are called electors, people who are appointed to cast their votes in the Electoral College, but to direct electors to vote for the candidate that wins the most votes nationwide.
And several states have done that. There's a real movement behind it, and I don't know if they will get enough, but they're making progress. A lot of big states have decided to do it because the Electoral College very much favors small states, and that was one of the compromises in our Constitution. But in addition to that anomaly, we have been facing over the last 10 years a concerted effort to suppress the vote and to narrow the number of people who do vote. So for example, in some states, they have imposed very onerous identification requirements. So we had lots of stories and many studies were done after this past election of elderly people, for example, coming to the polls. They no longer drive, so they don't have a photo ID driver's license, but they come with their utility bills and their passport or something else that has a comparable import, and they're told, no, these are the only specific IDs we will take. And this is all designed to shrink the electorate. And it particularly is aimed at young voters, the elderly, African Americans, Latinos. So most of the states are doing it very consciously, and we need a big effort to overcome that. And the final thing I would say is, we now know that the Russians were intruding into our electoral systems. There's no evidence that has yet been discovered that they were actually changing votes. However, many of our states use computer voting, and the computers don't have a paper ballot that they spit out at the end. Some of them, just you vote on them and then it's all within the computer. Some of them are hooked up to the internet, making them targets for potential interference, hacking, changing votes. So we need a very serious effort looking at how we vote. And some states are going back to old paper ballots because they can't convince themselves that computers that are on the market right now are necessarily safe and hacking proof. So there are a number of changes that I'd like to see us make.
Right. And in the campaign, and I don't intend to go back through it in detail, but is there one moment or one thing that if you could go back and change that still is in your mind?
Well, there are a lot of them. I will just mention one that I discuss in the book because this was a real dilemma for me. We had 3 debates in the fall election. And the first one and the third one were behind podiums. So we'd be asked questions and we would answer from our podiums. The second debate was supposed to be a town hall debate, which means the networks gather up representative citizens and have them ask the questions. But there was so much high drama leading into that debate that the people on stage got very few chances to ask the question, but we still were in a town hall kind of format. And if any of you saw it, the woman who did my hair today told me she saw it, and so I don't know if anybody was either up very, very late or looking at it as it was rebroadcast, but Trump was stalking me on the stage and invading my personal space, leering at me, making faces at me. Now, I did prepare for the debates. I also prepared to be president. I thought that's what you did in order to do the job. And in preparing for the debate, I thought that it was very important for me to maintain my cool, not get thrown off balance, certainly not get angry. But in real time, while he is stalking me, I'm thinking, this is really weird. And maybe I should just turn around and tell him, back up, you creep. Now,
what a great spirit.
I have
have to say I didn't do it. But I've thought since then that we were in this reality TV campaign. And he was our first reality TV candidate. And viewers are voters. And so perhaps if I had been willing to risk that, it was a big risk because I can just see the headlines afterwards. She can't take it, she blows up, she, attacks Trump, and, so I knew that that's what he was trying to get me to do, but I kept thinking maybe I should do that, but I didn't. And I've thought a lot about that because if we're going to have these high stakes elections be more like entertainment, then people who run for office are going to have more skills to be able to deal with it. And I think that was one of the missed opportunities.
There are many people in this room where they work alongside women and women work alongside men. What is the advice? So taking that point, unconscious bias, being really self-aware, if we are to achieve the aspiration you described in your opening comments around how we get the best out of both men and women working together. Are there any insights that you would want to share, playing it forward?
Absolutely. Play it forward and pay it forward. And I think for both men and women, we're going through a sea change in relationships. In the workplace, in the family, in public arenas. And so I think both men and women have to make a real effort to understand how best we can work together, learn to listen to each other, respect one another, and yes, deal with our conscious and unconscious biases. I have a friend who runs a very large technology company. Some of you may have heard of it, called Salesforce. And it's a huge company, and his name is Mark Benioff. And he saw all of this talk about how men and women weren't paid equally. And he thought to himself, well, I'm sure that's not true in my company. I'm an enlightened guy. The people I hire are, good folks looking for the best workers. But just to be sure, he asked his staff to conduct a total audit of all employees, the thousands of employees at Salesforce. And what he found was, yes, unconsciously, there were pay discrepancies, so that people who came in started at the same level, men and women, but not very soon after, as people were promoted and raises were given, men of the same experience level and education level began to move forward more quickly than comparable women. And he was determined to do something about it, so he did two things. He started conducting a lot of discussions, and honestly, people, in his opinion, were not aware that many of the decisions they made were disparate. And then he decided he was going to put in the money to level the pay. And I'm really proud of him for doing that, but he's one CEO out of many, many others who have not yet paid attention to it. So I think at the sort of CEO executive level, people should take a look and just to assure themselves, and also ask themselves and ask their colleagues, are you giving this raise because somebody played golf with you? Are you giving this raise because you're more comfortable with this person? Are you giving this raise because you just sort of think that that person has a better future and it's not necessarily related to the work they're doing now? There's a lot of questions that need to be asked, and I'm hoping that we can get to pay equity. It's very discouraging for a lot of women who work so hard, often carry most of the burden of families, not just children, but aging parents and other relatives who need their attention, and who feel like, no matter how hard they work, they're just never rewarded. So it's going to take a sea change of consciousness to match what's going on right now.
Well, I am pleased to report that there are a group of chairmen and chief executives in New Zealand who, your words would ring very clearly to them, but it is a huge battle of awareness for each of us. I want to come back quickly to an image that I remember clearly as the broadcast came in of the devastation of young women after the loss. And so many of them had hopes raised. And you mentioned earlier about getting women to vote and women to participate. Are there young women now, after this period of huge disappointment, that have come back to be inspired by what you did and are now determined to try? Are you seeing women in both the Democrats and the Republicans trying to come in, or has it had a barrier effect of pause and people reluctant to move?
Well, certainly on the Democratic Party side, it's been a tsunami of activity. There had never been more women running at our local, state, or federal level in our history. And there are a number of great examples of women who woke up after the election and said, I just can't believe this, so I'm going to do something. What should I do? Well, maybe I'll run for office. And it's a very gutsy decision. But the sheer numbers tell us that the reaction to the election was one of motivation, starting with the Women's March the day after Trump's inauguration, which I also write about having to go to, which really was a difficult decision. But you know, I did it because I thought it was the right thing to do. But I was thrilled that the next day, the crowds were enormous, for true, real crowds. And the level of intensity has been maintained. And a number of organizations, I just had a convening last Monday, a week ago, with these 11 groups that I'm sponsoring and mentoring. And they're from all over my country, and they are so determined to recruit candidates, train candidates, raise money for candidates, do everything to try to maximize our chances of winning. So it really has brought tens of thousands more women, not just as candidates, but being involved, running campaigns, volunteering, doing the hard work of actually trying to elect some new people.
And are you done? Would we hope that you would stand and
No, I'm really going to focus on helping more young people, and particularly young women, not only run for office, because that's a relatively small number, even though we hope many more will be interested, but talking to young women and encouraging young women. One of the greatest examples of young people in our country right now are the students who survived that terrible mass shooting in Parkland, Florida. And the way that they have refused to stand down, that they continue to speak out, that they are trying to make gun safety an issue, which in our country has, I think, given hope to many people, because we have too many of these horrible incidents, and the ones you read about are just the biggest ones. I mean, we have more than 30,000 people killed every year by guns, and so it's a constant concern, and unfortunately we're up against a very well-funded opponent, the National Rifle Association, and the majority of gun owners actually favor a lot of the common sense gun measures that I and others promote, and these young people just will not retreat. So maybe it will manifest itself in people running for office and getting elected in our November midterm elections who will have the courage to actually do something, because the last time we had any significant gun safety measures passed was when Bill was president, and we banned assault weapon sales for 10 years, and murders with assault weapons went down, as you might expect. So we know these measures would work without endangering anybody's right to have guns and to use them, but we've got to do more to keep people safe, and these young people are leading us to do that.
And just lastly on And is there a woman president candidate in your line of sight that you think could lift as you sought to lift?
Oh, I think there are a number of women who could, I'm not sure who will, choose to run. But I think much of that decision making will wait to see the outcomes of the November elections, because if the United States votes for a Democratic House and or a Democratic Senate, then a number of the women will think about it, either staying in the Senate and assuming more influence there or in the House, or maybe running for governor, whatever they might decide. If we aren't successul, and I believe we will be, but if we were not to be, then I think that would also enter into the calculation. So it's way too soon. I mean, there are a lot of people who would be excellent candidates. One thing I write about in the book about being a woman in politics is, you know, when the election was over and other women in elected office began to speak up and speak out and get more attention, they started getting the same kinds of online attacks and criticism that I did. So we have to address this together, and we have to call it out together. I sometimes, when you ask me about what I might have done differently, you know, I did call it out, but I maybe could have done it more and been more consistent in doing it because it was so blatant, especially given my opponent.
Well, let me ask you a question on that. I mean, we live in an environment where social media is a new paradigm and we have to make sense of it. But it strikes me in your book and the things you said earlier in the 4 challenges you laid down, that this question of being free to speak, and it's a cherished value that I know you've promoted over your lifetime, and it's in a democracy at the core of that. But is the freedom of speech, in the social media sense, appropriate when people can be anonymous? And when will we and how should we think about requiring them, if they wish to say these things, the trolls and the critics and the people who are literally downright bullying, while you and I might be able to take it? This is clearly damaging our girls and indeed our boys. Are we at a moment in history where we have to balance off free speech in the social media context with some new thinking?
That's a really important question, because I am an adamant defender of the First Amendment and the press. Even though obviously I have my problems with them, I will defend them because it's such a critical part of how we define a free society. But I think we are in a new world when it comes to online, and what we found is that it's not even just real people. It's hordes of bots, and you know, they're not just anonymous, they don't exist. They're being programmed to attack me or attack, you know, somebody else, and they are being sent out like an army to undermine and to plant falsehoods in the minds of people. So I do think we have to come to grips with this. The technology companies will have to do more than they have done to be sure that their platforms are not being abused. Obviously, Facebook came in for a considerable amount of criticism when it became clear that, you know, they were hosting a lot of bots, they were hosting a lot of Russian sites that were being manufactured in places like Macedonia. So we've got to understand, as you rightly say, who's behind the speech. I'm all for people expressing themselves, but I think when it comes to certainly political speech, there does have to be some identification. And that also goes for ads, because what we had in this last election that was a new phenomenon was all kinds of fake news. And by that I mean, if you ever went online to search it, you would see people who looked like they were in a broadcast setting, like they were in a news organization somewhere. And they would be talking nonsense about me or somebody else, making up stories, but there was no identification. There was no disclosure. Who's paying for that? Where is it coming from? I mean, some of them were coming
from Ukraine. Some of them were coming from other places, but they were all purposefully being directed to not just undermine me, but to sow all these doubts and to play on our worst instincts. So I don't know the answers yet, and but I think we have to have that conversation because we have a very free-for-all of information, which is mostly to the good, but we do have to give some thought as to maximizing disclosure, providing more information, so that people can know who is telling me this and then make an appropriate judgment.
You challenge the audience to think about whether women should be in support or in the lead. Can you remember what moment or what cause activated you to that personal leadership determination where you thought, I am going to step up? Did someone open that door, or did you simply decide this was your moment and you were going to make a difference?
Well, I never thought I would run for office, but I always thought I would be an activist. And because of my mother's own difficult childhood, I was particularly drawn to finding ways to help support children, and particularly children who were neglected or abused or poor and hungry or other kinds of obstacles that they were facing. So when I was in law school, I heard about a woman who had started something called the Children's Defense Fund. And I met her and I was very impressed with her, and I went to work for her in law school, and I worked for her after I graduated from law school. And some of what was in the video, gathering information about how many children were out of school because they had disabilities. And until 1975, our schools didn't have to take children with disabilities. And so we were gathering this information and these stories in order to change the law, which we did. Or trying to get juveniles out of adult prisons, something that should have never happened but was quite common around our country. Or trying to, prevent, states from excluding black children from school. So this is what I did when I worked for the Children's Defense Fund. And then when I was in Arkansas, I started a comparable group, and we worked on education reform, and we tried to provide more health clinics for people. And generally, my focus was on how we could lift up children. I never thought about running for office myself until 1998. And here's what happened. In 1998, there was an election, these midterm elections I've been talking about. And surprisingly, the Democrats did much better than anybody had predicted. And right after the election, the senior senator from New York, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, a great scholar and real public intellectual, announced he would not run for re-election. And immediately, people from New York started calling me, asking me if I would run, and I said no. I said, I don't live in New York. I intend to live in New York after we leave the White House, but I can't do it. But they were persistent, and they kept after me, and they kept sending delegations to see me, and they kept, providing me data and information, and I kept saying no. But here's what happened. I went in the spring of 1998, so it was probably April, as First Lady, to go to an event to promote women in sports. There was a documentary that had been produced, and Billie Jean King and some other great women athletes were at this high school in New York City where we were kicking off this unveiling, this premiere of this documentary. So I was introduced by the young woman who was the captain of the basketball team. And there'd been a lot of speculation in the press about people trying to get me to run for the Senate from New York. So she introduced me, and I went up, and she was a lot taller than me, and I was shaking her hand. She had to bend over because she was tall. And as she bent over while I was saying, thank you, that was so great, we did a really good job, she leaned over and she whispered in my ear, dare to compete, Mrs. Clinton, dare to compete. And I thought, wow. I mean, all of the political arguments to me had not made much of a dent. But when this young woman said that to me, I thought, you know, I have spent years encouraging young women to compete, to run for office, try out for sports teams, just push themselves to see how far they could go. And here I am, and I'm not doing it, and maybe I should rethink it. So I did. And then about 2 months later, I said I would do it. So it was very serendipitous.
Fabulous message for all of us here in daring to compete. As Secretary of State, you presided over many things, the Iran and denuclearization. There are two issues that are certainly on the minds of New Zealanders at the moment. How hopeful can we be around Korea at this time, and it feels close from this point at the bottom of the Pacific? And also your view on globalization. A lot of us here in New Zealand, we're a small nation that sells to the world, and globalization has benefited us, although there's a mood change. And so how do we facilitate fair and free trade so that others are included while still benefiting from that? And are you concerned? Are we seeing headwinds around the US-China dispute, and how should we be looking at that?
Those are two great questions. With respect to Korea, I don't know whether to be optimistic or pessimistic yet. Clearly, other American presidents have negotiated to try to persuade successive North Korean regimes to give up their nuclear weapons. It's been a very disappointing effort. Progress was made in the late 90s, I think while you were Prime Minister, to persuade the North Koreans to stop their plutonium program, and they did, and they actually, in front of the world, destroyed their plutonium production facilities. But at the same time, they started a secret uranium enrichment program. So it's very hard to fully understand what Kim Jong-un is trying to achieve. I'm encouraged that at least there's been the North-South dialogue. It appears as though China may be more engaged than they have been, which is all to the good. In fact, having Kim Jong-un go to Beijing and consult with Xi Jinping was a good sign. So the devil's in the details. And what I worry about is that our administration, in any discussions with the North, which is still the plan, will not be fully prepped about all the variations on what denuclearization can mean and how best to verify that. But I'm going to be hopeful, even though I don't know whether I can be optimistic yet, that maybe something good can come out of this negotiation that will truly make the Korean Peninsula safer and ideally remove the threat posed by North Korea's nuclear program. I mean, the reason this is so pressing is that experts say, given the most recent intercontinental ballistic missile testing, that the projection is that a missile could reach the United States. Now, if it could reach the United States, it certainly can reach Japan and South Korea and everywhere else in the region. So let us hope for the best, and I'll be watching that very closely. You know, the question you ask about globalization is critical for all of us, because when people talk about globalization, they're really talking about the accelerated pace of free trade, of corporations crossing borders, that has resulted in the quickest uplifting of the standard of living for the most people ever in the history of the world, which is a good thing. But As with any kind of movement or phenomenon, it's time to take stock of what works and what doesn't work. You know, industrialization, starting in the early 19th century and accelerating through that century, led eventually to the labor union movement, to reforms such as imposing limits on child labor, creating more of a watchdog accountability so that you could have regulatory power used to prevent abuses that were really prevalent everywhere. So you can see a phenomenon like globalization and you can say, okay, a lot of good things came from it. But now we've got to take stock because there's a great deal of insecurity in countries, not just middle income and higher income countries, but many countries that are, feeling some of the benefits, but now facing the uncertainties about what happens next to them. So, in our country, sometimes globalization is used as the explanation for the loss of manufacturing jobs, and there is some truth to that. But it's also true that technology and robotics has also cost an enormous number of jobs, and the projection is that it will undermine employment in many, many areas of the economy, not just what we think of as manufacturing or industrial employment, but increasingly even in white-collar employment as well. So unless we want to see jobs disappear at an even faster rate in countries like mine, we've got to come to grips with how we provide jobs and income to people, how we define that, how we encourage and incentivize businesses, how we deal with the increasing certainty that technology will cost us more jobs as it gets more sophisticated. And as you look at other countries that have benefited from their cheap labor rates, as their standard of living goes up, they're no longer so cheap. So is it another race to the bottom? And then what happens to those countries? I think we have to look at the safety nets, and we have to decide how we do more to provide basic housing that is affordable, jobs that are available, and the skills training and education that goes with it, and not as an excuse to avoid dealing with the problem, but as a pathway to solutions. Because if all you do is argue about it and point fingers about it, it doesn't stop it, it doesn't modify and reform it. So I think we have some real work to do, and I hope we do it, and I hope a lot of countries try different approaches. Franklin Roosevelt talked about bold, persistent experimentation. So New Zealand tries some things, Australia tries some things, Europe does, United States, and then we share that information about how we build back in, more predictability and provide more support for people who are trying to get good jobs and raise families and afford to do so.
So you have two very special people in your lives, little Charlotte and Aidan. What do you hope for them, and what next for Hillary Clinton?
Well, yes, I could do a whole hour on my grandchildren, but I won't. A little, just a little. Yes, I have to say, grandparenting is one experience that is not overrated. It is just a joy for us, and we live close enough, and so far, my daughter and son-in-law don't mind us being there as often as we can, so we see a lot of Charlotte and Aidan. I hope for them the kind of opportunities that I hope for all children. I don't hope that my grandchildren get great educations. I hope that all children do, because you can do your very best with your own children or your own grandchildren, and you can try to provide them with every kind of experience and opportunity you can afford to give them, but they eventually go out into a world where other people will influence the quality of their lives and how effective they can be in turning their dreams into realities. And so when I think about my own country, I think about what more we can do to provide equal opportunity for all children, and particularly for disadvantaged kids or kids who are oftentimes overlooked. And I want my grandchildren to be kind and compassionate and caring and empathetic, because I don't want them to feel that they're entitled because they were born into a family of means and a family that values education, and we'll do everything we can to give them the best future possible. But I want them to feel, as I do, that there's more to life than just your own personal success, and how they can be of service will be very important to see developed. I'm looking forward to finding ways to continue to speak out. After the election, I think because it was so devastating for so many people, they didn't want to think about it, they didn't want to talk about it, and there were people who said, you shouldn't think about it or talk about it either. Well, fat chance of that. And so when they tell me, don't talk, it's not about me personally anymore, because I'm out of politics, at least electoral politics, but I am very much in mode as an active citizen. And when I see things that I think are going to be harmful, they're going to be harmful to my country, harmful to my country's leadership in the world, maybe harmful to my grandchildren, I'm going to keep speaking out. I think that should be everybody's decision, that we're not going to turn a blind eye or give up in despair or frustration when we see things that we don't think are right. We're having a very important struggle in the United States right now, and it's difficult to fully grasp because there are 20 stories a day, and people are getting just overwhelmed by the strange goings-on that we are living through. And sometimes you wonder, do I have the energy to keep going? How do I sustain this commitment? Now, so far, it has been sustained. But the other side counts on people just getting tired and going back into their own personal lives and really not going to marches and not working for candidates and not trying to, demonstrate against pulling us out of the Paris Agreement, leaving the United States the only country that is not formally fighting climate change. All of these things, there's so much going on. So I want to kind of keep rallying the troops, keep speaking out, encouraging people to get involved as much as possible, and talking about the stakes, because the stakes could not be higher. And so I feel very, very good in this role that I have now. And I'm going to do everything I can to help other people win elections, and to take back the House and the Senate so that we can provide some checks and balances on the administration. And then I'm going to do everything I can to help elect whoever the Democrats nominate to be the next president. So that's what I'll be doing.
Secretary Clinton, Senator Clinton, Hillary, it's been a privilege to have you with us, and I suspect we could spend a lot more time this evening, but they're saying it's time to wrap. I want to thank you for sharing your insights and sharing your leadership, which we have watched with such admiration in the many roles that you have had. We want to thank you for the role model that you are, not only to women but to men, in terms of the value of diversity when it's at its best. We want to wish you well with your family that I know means the world to you, and as you read your book, you'd be blind if you didn't understand that. But I also wish you well for the future. You are an inspiration to many of us, and we wish you wind under your wings as you do whatever it is that you need to do next. Thank you for including New Zealand in your tour. And ladies and gentlemen, can I ask you to thank Hillary Clinton for sharing her.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was quite a treat. That was quite a treat indeed. The growth faculty have asked me to just make a couple of summarising remarks, I guess. You can probably make this up for yourself, but you have heard there some real insights both into global themes, the geopolitical tensions in the world today, the gender politics, the continuing, or the dangers of continuing to hold women to an impossible standard, but also some very personal stories from a very proud grandmother, a proud mother, and a woman with a lifetime of experience, and as you saw for yourselves, certainly still a sparkle in her eye. Senator Clinton this evening gave us some insights. She also laid down some challenges, and I encourage you all to, as you leave here this evening, to continue the conversation with your friends, your colleagues, your whānau, and to do as Senator Clinton suggested, the challenge that was laid out to her all of those years ago, dare to compete. There are a lot of challenges for all of us, and we can only do something about them when we work together. So I bid you farewell as your audience. Before you leave, of course, I must thank the Growth Faculty. I hope you enjoyed this first event in the Growth Faculty that will be coming up.
Boy, that was a lot of hot air coming off of that stage. What a waste of money. Well, there you go. Hillary Clinton at the Spark Arena. I wonder where she would be coming out. There's no way it's gonna be right into a car. Well, very disappointing. I suppose I could have stood up and screamed something. That's what Laura Loomer would have done, but I don't want to go to court in New Zealand. Well, that's it, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you tomorrow.